Chapter 619. When she saw that Gong Dai was really kneeling on the ground, two streams of blood tears flowed from her eyes that were supposed to be lifeless. She could not speak. Her pair of ferocious eyes stared quietly at Gong Dai. Her blood tears flowed and disappeared into the depths of the grass. She was like a puppet that was being controlled. Under the violent outer shell, she struggled and roared in her heart. Every time her body and mind clashed, it was the price to pay. A bloody mess was unavoidable. When Gong Dai saw her tears of blood, he felt his heart clench in pain. Only now did he know how much his royal sister had suffered alone. He knelt a few steps forward and carefully approached her. "Momo, it's all right." One of her shoes had fallen off, and her stocking had fallen off as well. Her feet, which were originally white like jade, were now cold and scarred. Stepping on the withered grass, he reached out with a trembling hand to touch her feet. Her small toes suddenly curled up, as if resisting his closeness. Gong Dai pretended not to notice. He lowered his head and carefully examined her feet. He realized that most of the wounds were caused by stones and grass. It made his heart ache for no reason. "Momo, you still remember me, right?" Gong Ju raised his head and reached out to touch her clothes. He didn't dare to make too big of a movement, but he approached her little by little. Gong Emo seemed to be dead, leaving only an empty shell behind. But the tears from her unfocused eyes fell on the back of Gong Ju's hand, leaving a burn mark. Gong Ju finally couldn't bear it and hugged her tightly. At that moment, he seemed to understand why she was crying. It was really difficult to be together. She was in pain, tired and aggrieved. This knowledge made his heart ache. At this moment, he was still kneeling and could only hug her waist. Even though it was not easy for him to hug her, he did not dare to use any strength. Her body was covered in injuries. If he used any strength, it would be a second injury. He hugged her gently for a while and carefully reached out to touch her lower abdomen. "You also know that you're pregnant, right?" Gong Dai raised his head and asked softly. Gong Yimo could not give him an answer. She stood there like a stone statue. Her chest heaved up and down violently, as if a ferocious beast was about to break free. Her face and eyes were extremely ferocious, but the tears that kept falling proved that she was still rational. She could hear what he was saying. "You're also afraid of hurting the child, right?" "He's fine. He's fine." Gong Dai tried his best to coax her. He did not get an answer, but he was not angry. His face was stained with Gong Yimo's cold blood, but he did not feel it. He raised his head and slowly got up, reaching out to wipe her tears. She was quiet. When she wiped away her tears, he stood up as well. Because Gong Dai was a head taller than Gong Yimo, he lowered his head and gently hugged her in his arms. She could hear his strong and heavy heartbeat. "It's okay, baby, it's okay." He apologized sincerely. "No matter what you've experienced, I won't ask. No matter what secrets you have, I don't want to know. Don't be sad, baby. It's okay." Gong Dai desperately wanted to help her, but he had no choice. He could only think of knocking her out. So he did his best to coax her gently and divert her attention. "Imo, can you relax a little?" He felt that Gong Yimo's body was too tense. The slightest touch would break her. Her state was sometimes calm and sometimes crazy. He was really afraid of agitating her. He did not know how long she could hold it in. When she went crazy, would she hurt herself again? So he told her to relax again and again. "Imo, I didn't expect us to have a child so soon. Do you think he'll be like you or me?" Gong Dai muttered to himself as his hand gently moved behind her neck. "I hope it's a son. How good would it be to let him protect you with me?" At this moment, Gong Yimo was no longer crying. She stared at Gong Dai's shoulder with unfocused eyes. However, her body showed that she was fighting against the goo poison every minute and every second. So her expression became more and more ferocious, and her small hands clenched tighter and tighter. Gong Dai's voice gradually choked. He gently pressed his forehead against Gong Yimo's and told her softly, "Imo, I'm sorry. I didn't take good care of you." The moment he said this, he raised the knife in his hand and slashed at Gong Yimo's neck. However, something unexpected happened. Before he could slash at Gong Yimo's neck, her eyes suddenly widened. She bit down hard on Gong Dai's collarbone. She bit down hard. It was as if she wanted to tear him apart. Gong Dai's attack also missed because of her bite. It seemed to have no effect on her body. Gong Dai was shocked. He ignored her biting him and slashed at the back of her neck again. This time, she grabbed his hand. There was no longer any humanity in her scarlet eyes. There was only bloodthirsty. She growled like a wild beast, then grabbed Gong Dai's neck and pressed him against a tree. She opened her mouth and bit down on Gong Dai's body again. He was in so much pain that he sucked in a breath of cold air. He wanted to resist, but he realized that he was powerless. After the bite, her mouth was filled with blood. The corners of her mouth curled up, and she finally revealed a bloodthirsty smile. She raised her head and stared at the prey in her hand. She gradually tightened her grip. This time, Gong Dai immediately felt suffocated. Gong Yimo did not hold back. She really wanted to kill him. Gong Dai grabbed her hands and resisted with all his might. However, after Gong Yimo went berserk, her strength was astonishing. The veins on Gong Dai's forehead popped out. Would he die here? Royal sister. She really wanted to kill him. Immerse. Suddenly, Gong Che's urgent voice sounded. Gong Yimo fiercely turned around. Her beast-like gaze caused a group of guards to surround Gong Che. Lo Chi and the rest had been searching for a long time. They finally heard the sound and came here. They did not expect to see such a scene. Let go of the prince. They all pulled out their swords, but it was useless. If Gong Yimo wanted to attack, none of them would be a match for her. More and more people came. For some reason, Gong Yimo suddenly let go of Gong Dai, who was about to die. She gave the crowd a fierce look, then turned around and ran up the mountain. Cough, cough. Cough, cough. Royal sister. Gong Dai held his neck and gasped for air. He could feel that at the most critical moment, Royal sister let him go. She still recognized him, even if she was in a state of insanity. Gong Yimo ran away. Seeing Gong Dai struggle to stand up and want to chase after her, Gong Che could not help but pull him back. Don't go. She doesn't recognize you anymore. Can't you see that she's about to strangle you to death? Gong Che did not want Gong Dai to die in Immerse's hands. When Immerse woke up, she would be in so much pain that she would want to die. However, Gong Dai shook off his hand. She remembers me. His eyes were bloodshot from the lack of oxygen, but he kept staring in the direction of the mountain. I have to stop her. She's going to do something stupid. Chapter 620. Gong Che could not persuade him and could only let go. Gong Dai moved quickly, and the rest of the people were not slow either. They ran towards the altar at the end of the stairway. That was the place where the founding empress had jumped to her death. It was also the most sacred place in Dayu State. Before they got close, Gong Che heard the sounds of an intense battle. It was Immerse and Gong Dai. Near the altar, two red figures were fighting. Their movements were too fast, and outsiders could only see after images. Gong Che watched the two of them fight and did not dare to approach. The rest of the people could not help even if they wanted to. They could only watch anxiously from the side. As Gong Yimo had lost her rationality, Gong Dai could only try his best to not be killed by her. Perhaps she would wake up when she was completely drained of her strength. With this thought in mind, Gong Dai endured the pain in his heart and began to attack fiercely. It was unknown if his potential had been stimulated at the critical moment, but Gong Dai was actually able to hold Gong Yimo back without falling into a disadvantageous position. Gong Che could not help, so he could only shout Gong Yimo's name from the side. Immerse, wake up. He is Gong Dai. Gong Yimo was indifferent. Under the suppression of the goo poison, she was sometimes clear-headed and sometimes confused. But now, she had lost her rationality. Gong Dai wanted to hold her back and exhaust her strength, but Gong Dai could not do it alone. Gong Yimo's moves were getting more and more powerful, and Gong Dai's injuries were increasing. Everyone could only see the crazy side of Gong Yimo, but they did not know what kind of torment she was enduring inside. Gong Yimo felt like she was trapped in a cage, surrounded by red curtains. She could see everything that was happening around her clearly, but most of the time, she could not control her body. She was like an inexhaustible beast. She could not lose her rationality. She was afraid that if she completely lost her rationality, she would not be able to resist rushing down the mountain to kill someone or kill Gong Dai who was looking for her. She did not want to die. She did not know why she was struggling at death's door. She only silently told herself to endure it. Perhaps if she could endure it, she would not die. If she didn't die, would she still have a chance to marry Gongju? She did not want to die. But when she saw Gong Dai stabbing at her with a dagger, she could not hold it in anymore. She knocked away his dagger and exposed herself. She wanted to leave. She could not stay in front of him for too long. She was afraid that she would break his neck in the next second, but when she heard him scream her name, she could not stop. She couldn't help but stop. Even though she desperately wanted to leave, she couldn't. Her body and heart longed for him. The more pain she felt, the more she wanted to stay by his side. She wanted him to coax her gently and hold her in his arms. But no, he would kill her. So she did not turn back. She was afraid that if she did, she would not be able to leave. But she heard him urging her to stay, his voice heavy and lingering. He said that they had a child, but she did not believe him. He must be lying to her. He was so cunning, then. Such a proud person like him begged her softly behind her, begging her not to leave and to face it together. At that moment, her heart felt like it was being squeezed by something. It hurt so much that she could not breathe. He carefully approached her, but she told herself to leave. The first generation was out of control. Were you going to kill your lover with your own hands? He was still approaching her. He wanted to help her so much. He wanted to face it with her so much. He did not want to give up on her. He seemed to have forgotten how dangerous she was at this moment. She could not wait any longer. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth. She could feel the killing intent in her body getting more and more uncontrollable. She had to leave immediately, but he called out to her again. He even knelt down in front of her. Even though he did not turn back, Gong Yimo could feel his every move. He thought that she still hated him for what he had done in her past life, so he knelt down to apologize. He used a very humble and lowly method to provoke her and ask her to turn back. He said that he had killed her in her past life. So now, he was kneeling in front of her. She could vent all her unhappiness on him. As long as she did not leave, as long as she turned back, all her pain, resentment, and unwillingness, even if it had nothing to do with him in this life, he was still willing to admit his mistake. Because his love for her was enough to make him put down all his dignity. He was clearly such a strong person. At that moment, she turned back because she wanted to tell him crazily, "I don't blame you anymore. I don't blame you anymore. I don't blame or hate you for what happened in my past life. Can you get up? You're making my heart ache." But she could not say a single word. Countless emotions surged and blocked her throat. She was anxious and in pain. In the end, it turned into tears of blood. When she turned around, she saw that his face had the same expression of heartache. His eyes were red. He was angry because of her injuries, unwillingness, pain. At that moment, she thought she was dead. This was the man she loved deeply. How could she make him feel so bad? She might as well not persist and just die. But unfortunately, after persisting for so long, she still could not become his bride. "Momo, I know you're rational. Can you wake up?" Gong Ju saw Gong Yimo's ferocious expression. Her eyes were either black or red. Her black hair fluttered in the wind, and her red dress was as red as blood. It was as if the whole world was dyed red. Every move she made was a killing move. Every step she took, she had a kind of beauty that made one's heart tremble. At this moment, Gong Dai's body was covered with injuries. In some places, his bones could be seen. But he did not give up. He could not give up on her. If even he gave up on her, then she would be alone again. The more the two of them fought, the closer they got to the altar. Gong Dai became more and more afraid. This staircase was so deep that he could not see the bottom. The closer they got, the cold wind whistled from the bottom of the cliff. Gong Yimo's iron chain ruthlessly lashed out at Gong Dai's chest. His chest instantly split open and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was no match for the crazy Gong Yimo. Now, He could only grit his teeth and endure. "Your Highness." Lo Chi and the rest panicked. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai's martial arts were not on the same level as theirs. Especially when the two of them were going all out, they could not interfere at all. No, it was not that they could not interfere. The guards behind them all had cold bows on their backs. If the situation really went out of control, they could still kill Gong Yimo on the spot. When Gong Dai was hit again, Gong Che could not watch any longer. "Gong Dai, come here. If you continue like this, you will die." Chapter 621. Gong Dai acted as though he did not hear anything. He could not leave. If he left, what would happen to Royal Sister? Gong Che had no other choice. He ordered his men to raise their bows and aim at Gong Yimo. This was a very risky move, because the two of them were moving too fast. Even if the arrows were aimed, no one knew what would happen in the end. However, Gong Che had no other choice. He had to help Gong Dai delay Immerse. If this continued, Immerse would definitely kill Gong Dai. "Release the arrows." 10 arrows flew towards Gong Yimo from different directions. At that moment, she did not dodge. Instead, she gave Gong Dai a hard slap, causing him to stagger back a few steps. His face instantly turned pale. Gong Che was right. If this continued, Gong Dai would definitely die in her hands. "Stop it." An arrow pierced her chest, but it only caused her to pause for a moment. She continued to attack Gong Dai without stopping at all. She attacked him tirelessly, fast and ruthlessly. The feeling of flesh and blood bursting open was the only way to fully express the anger in her body. The more blood she saw, the harder it was to control. "Stop it." Tears of blood flowed down again, but she could not stop. Every time Gong Dai vomited blood, she felt like she was going to vomit blood too. Her chest was very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Seeing her cry, Gong Dai's eyes turned red. At this moment, he was in a sorry state. There were wounds of all sizes. It could be said that he had suffered more than all the wounds he had suffered in his life. However, seeing Gong Yimo cry made his heart ache even more. "It's okay." His blood-stained lips trembled slightly. His dark, jade-like eyes looked at her quietly. "I don't blame you." However, in the next second, Gong Yimo's fingers left deep scratches on his body. Another arrow pierced her shoulder. At that moment, her face was contorted due to the pain. "Stop it." She suddenly raised her head and screamed. The struggle and pain in that scream were so obvious. She was on the verge of being torn apart by the two emotions of controlling and venting. Her face was covered in blood. At that moment, she finally fell into an even more terrifying madness. Unbeknownst to her, they had already reached the altar. Gong Dai's stubborn resistance and occasional sneak attacks made her go crazy like a trapped beast. At this moment, Gong Yimo roared again. At that moment, her strength seemed to have reached its peak at a speed visible to the naked eye. She pushed Gong Dai back with a palm strike and clenched her fists tightly. At this moment, a section of the iron chain on her wrist was turned into iron powder by the inner strength that overflowed from her body. Specks of silver-white powder dissipated in the cold wind at the edge of the cliff and disappeared into her fluttering long hair. It was as if she was using her life to prepare for the final attack. But at this moment, Gong Dai was powerless to resist. He had a premonition that in the next second, he would die in the hands of the royal sister. Could it be that this was fate? A dagger suddenly appeared in Gong Yimo's hand. After a few moves, she pinned Gong Dai to the ground. She raised the dagger in her hand high, and with a thunderous momentum, she stabbed it towards his chest. This time, he was definitely going to die. At the moment of death, Gong Dai's eyes were surprisingly calm. His eyes were filled with her reflection, but it was not her crazy appearance, but her sober appearance. She was quick-witted and sweet, with a smile that gathered all the beauty in the world. "Stop it!" "Pooh!" The blade ruthlessly pierced into his flesh. Hot blood splashed onto Gong Dai's face. He opened his eyes in a daze, and then his eyes widened in an instant. "Royal sister!" Immerse. Gong Che hurriedly ran towards them. When Gong Yimo attacked, Gong Che thought that Gong Dai was definitely going to die, because under such a murderous situation, Imo would not be able to control herself. But at the last moment, Gong Yimo pressed Gong Dai under her body, and when the dagger was about to pierce Gong Dai's chest, it made a sharp turn. The blade quickly cut through Gong Dai's chest and finally entered her own body. At that moment, the world fell silent. The pain gave Gong Yimo a moment of rationality. At this moment, her messy black hair was stuck to her face, and her pair of ferocious black and red eyes revealed a trace of purity. She gasped for breath, kneeling on Gong Dai's body, and spoke in a hoarse voice. I have long stopped blaming you. From the day she fell in love with him, she had already decided to marry him. What else was there to blame? Her hoarse voice continued. She looked at him in a daze, as if she wanted to imprint his appearance in the depths of her soul. I love you. After saying that, her expression turned ferocious again. She pulled out the dagger from her body, and without caring about the blood flowing out, she directly cut through the meridians in both of Gong Dai's legs. Then, she resolutely ran towards the cliff. She ran so fast that her fluttering red dress was like a flying red cloud, gathering all the gorgeous colors on the cold cliffs of the mountain peak. She resolutely jumped off the cliff, but at the last moment, someone hugged her and fell with her. If it wasn't for Gong Dai, his meridians would have been cut by her, and he wouldn't be able to get up. The biting cold wind from the mountain stream seemed to have brought her back a little. She heard many people shouting from the top of the cliff, Your Majesty, Gong Che? She tried hard to turn around to look at him, but she was tightly hugged from behind by Gong Che. Her face was facing the sky, and her back was facing the cliff. Imo his voice was blown away by the wind, and he wasn't sure if she could hear him in this rapid fall. Don't be afraid. Gong Dai's bright yellow robe fluttered upwards, lifting up her blood-red dress. The same gorgeous colors were like fireworks. Before they dissipated, they collided into each other, creating an extreme beauty. This time, I'll protect you. He tightly hugged Gong Yimo. His mind couldn't help but recall the words she had said when they were building the canal. Because they had to blow up the rocks and cut off the water flow, forcing it to change its course, Gong Yimo had to walk alone on the mountain peak, looking for a suitable angle to blow up the rocks. Gong Che was worried and wanted to help her find the gap, but she refused. Crown Prince Gidge, this place is too high. What if I fall? You can just go over there and wait for me. Gong Che looked at the deep water below and said disapprovingly, There's water below. You won't die even if you fall. And because he was building the canal, he had trained himself to be a good swimmer. Gong Yimo smiled and told him, That's where you're wrong. She walked over and looked down with Gong Che. The position was too high, and the water below was as beautiful as a mirror. The gentle wind caused the short hair on her head to curl up cutely. She spoke as if she was telling the truth. Falling from such a high place, with the addition of gravity and speed, even if there's water below, the moment you touch the water, it will be as painful as landing on the ground. You'll die. Seeing that Gong Che didn't seem to understand, she giggled. In short, if you accidentally fall into the water in the future, it's best to adjust your body in time and use your back to touch the water to reduce the damage. The rest will depend on your luck. Chapter 622. Under the warm sunlight, she spoke seriously about this common knowledge. Gong Che only felt the soft hair on the top of her head fluttering in the wind. All the way to the tip of his heart, the cold wind was painful. He was now hugging Immerse from behind with his back facing the bottom. The stairway to heaven was the source of the soaring dragon river and also the holy land of Dayu State. At that moment, he prayed in his heart. If there really was a god, be it the founding empress who jumped off the cliff or the immortals who ascended to heaven, no matter who it was, please listen to his sobs and protect the woman in his arms. He hugged Gong Yimo tightly. Many images of her flashed through his mind. She smiled and forced him to eat desserts. She was drunk and silly. In order to save him, she blew up the dragon boat and faked her death to escape. At that time, he thought that if she really died, he might not live for long. At the last moment, when they were falling rapidly, Gong Yimo's vision was blurry. However, she heard a regretful voice telling her, "I'm sorry, I really can't be your brother, but I'm very happy to be able to protect you once." That voice paused. There were salty water droplets dripping from below onto her neck. That voice choked up. Zhozhuang dreamed of a butterfly, a lifetime of big dreams. I really hope that this world is also a dream. When I wake up again, I can return to the time when you were my wife. I won't let you down again. Immerse. Bang! The moment the heavy object fell into the water, Gong Yimo's head was tightly protected in Gong Che's arms. However, her head was still dizzy and her ears were ringing. At that moment, she clearly heard the sound of something shattering. That was Gong Che's spine. At this height, he couldn't help but be crushed by the water surface. He would definitely die. Her heart ached and she almost couldn't breathe. The turbulent water drowned her. She completely lost her mind. She didn't know if she had fainted or gone crazy. It didn't matter. Under the cliff, who could be hurt? She was so tired and in so much pain. Suddenly, she didn't want to wake up. Emo, royal sister. After Gong Dai regained his senses, he opened his eyes wide and struggled to crawl towards the edge of the cliff. Because Gong Yimo was afraid that he would do something stupid, she cut off the meridians in his legs. He couldn't stand up, so he could only crawl over. Everyone panicked. What should they do? The princess jumped off the cliff. The emperor also jumped off the cliff. And the prince. Everyone's eyes were red as they looked at Gong Ju, but they didn't dare to step forward. A deep sadness shrouded the altar. They knew in their hearts that no one could help Gong Ju at this time. No one could intervene. Luo Qi and the others knelt beside Gong Ju. They wanted to stop him, but they didn't dare. He was an iron-blooded man, but at this moment, he couldn't help but choke with tears. They all knew that falling into the water from a high altitude would be fatal. The height of the sky stairway, the protruding giant steps, and the surging dragon river made them all clear in their hearts that unless the gods were present, the princess and his majesty were definitely dead. Gong Dai turned a deaf ear to them and continued to crawl towards the edge. Finally, he reached the edge of the cliff. His cold face seemed to be in a daze as he looked down. Actually, he couldn't see anything. Because it was too high, the bottom was foggy. At this height, there was no doubt that they would die. For some reason, Gong Dai wanted to laugh. But when he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Gong Dai's body had so many injuries. If he spat out another mouthful of blood, even the gods wouldn't be able to save him. Lo Qi and the rest were anxious. His majesty was dead. The prince was the only pillar of support for the entire Daiyu state. He couldn't fall. If he died, he would die. If he died, the entire Daiyu state would be plunged into chaos. Prince, you have to take care. Maybe the princess isn't dead. His voice was very soft. Even he didn't believe it. Gong Dai spat out another mouthful of blood. His bridal robe was riddled with holes and was dyed dark red. His face was getting paler and paler. It was so pale that it was shocking. Royal sister. His eyes were unfocused as he stared at a spot. His fingers dug deep into the soil beneath him. He was wrong. He was wrong. Gong Dai wanted to laugh. He really wanted to laugh. His thin lips were dyed a gorgeous color with blood. He finally laughed. But it was a sinister and twisted smile. It was as if it could swallow everything. He shouldn't have done so many stupid things. He shouldn't have let her do as she wished again and again. If he had rebelled from the start, who would dare to go against his wishes when he was in power? If he didn't care so much about the royal sister's thoughts and didn't listen to her arrangements, he wouldn't have lost her. He should have tied her up and locked her up. He shouldn't have allowed her to do anything that he didn't want to do. He should have forcefully plundered her and not blindly tolerated. He should have blindly tolerated. He thought that it would bring him what he wanted. It would bring him the woman he loved. Finally, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. This wasn't his nature. Gong Dai's eyes gradually turned red. That kind of red was similar to when Gong Yimo's poison acted up. There was only red and black in his eyes. There was no white. His nature. He should have killed all those who disobeyed him. Gong Che coveted the royal sister. Kill him. Gong Chang stopped him from being with the royal sister. Overturn it. The world didn't allow them to be together. He wanted to be the most supreme person. He wanted all those who opposed him to die and completely shut their mouths. This was his nature. Tolerating, accommodating, understanding, and tolerating. What did that bring him? Gong Dai raised his head and laughed loudly. He was controlled by others time and time again. He endured time and time again. He thought that tolerating her and respecting her decisions meant that he loved her and could have her. In the end, nothing happened. She died. She died in front of him with their child. He was still powerless. Why was he powerless? He had money. He had power. He had people. He had power. Why did he fall into such a state of powerlessness? If he had killed all the hidden dangers and tied her to his side, wouldn't everything be fine? Sure enough, he was wrong. He realized it too late. He hated. This world really disgusted him. It had completely toyed with him. It deliberately forced him to suppress his nature and deceived him into having hope. Then, when he had everything, it ruthlessly took it away. It was so evil. Such a world. He really wanted to be completely destroyed. Lo Chi saw that Gong Dai was unusually silent. He didn't dare to speak for fear of provoking him. But suddenly, there was an invisible pressure pressing on him. Gong Dai's black hair flew. He knelt on the ground at the edge of the cliff and suddenly raised his head. Even with his eyes closed, everyone could feel the terrible change in Gong Dai's body. There seemed to be some kind of power rising strangely. Gong Dai's robe fluttered. His whole person was like an immortal in the sky. But the terrible pressure on his body wasn't so good. The invisible inner strength rolled up all the stones around him and turned them into powder. Then, it blended into the terrible storm and formed a terrible hurricane. The hurricane rose with Gong Dai as the center, as if it wanted to tear everything apart. Chapter 623. Gong Dai gradually stood up. No, it would be more accurate to say that Gong Dai was floating in the air. Lo Chi finally understood where this power came from. His Highness had broken through, but at this time, Gong Dai stood up. His toes were on the ground and his body seemed to be lifted by the wind as he slowly opened his eyes. At this time, the blood in his eyes had completely disappeared, but his black eyes did not have any light at all. The world was silent and his red clothes were like blood. He was like a crazy demon as he stood up with a vicious aura that soared into the sky. He was wrong. This world was indeed as twisted and dark as he had imagined. It had snatched away everything he wanted the most. It had taken away everything he had painstakingly planned for all these years. He hated this world and hated everyone. If they all died, it would be good. Then no one would come to steal his emo. The pressure was still rising and everyone was being forced back by the blade like internal energy. Shaoqi anxiously said, "This is bad. I'm afraid His Highness has gone mad." As soon as his voice fell, he saw Gong Dai suddenly raise his head and roar. That voice was clearly sharp enough to make people's hearts tremble, but everyone present knew that this was just a wild beast that had lost its only love. It was just a final question before falling into madness. Questioning the world. Why was it playing with people like this? The world was despicable, forcing people to go mad. The roar spread through the mountain and countless birds and beasts were startled. They either flew up or lay on the ground. That invisible killing intent reverberated through the world, as if it was announcing that a person's consciousness had been erased and he had completely turned into a demon. Everyone was shocked. Finally, they saw Gong Dai's flying black hair turn white bit by bit. At first it was just a few strands, but in the wind, his flying hair turned completely white. There were strands of silver ash mixed within, and as they danced about, the ends of the hair leapt about in the wind, giving off a type of bewitching beauty. Could a person really be completely destroyed because their heart died? If they didn't believe it before, but in this moment, they had no choice but to believe it. A true demon had appeared in front of them. If they didn't stop it, the world would fall into chaos. Everyone's hearts sank as they became incomparably serious. Power. The feeling of being filled with power was incomparably beautiful. Gong Dai could feel that the wounds on his body were healing. It was a wonderful feeling. The 7th stage. 8th stage. His body seemed to have become a bottomless pit. Endless energy was being absorbed into his body, making him feel intoxicated. That's great. Imo, just you wait. Once I destroy this disgusting world, I'll accompany you. It won't be long. You have to wait for me. The gale seemed to have reached a critical point. Finally, when the pressure appeared, Lo Chi and the others looked at each other. Now was the time. Gong Dai was possessed by the devil. He was using a self-destructive method to force himself to advance to the next level. He was even trying to reach the legendary transformation of the 9th level. But this was also when he was at his weakest. If he didn't want him to die, now was the only time. Lo Chi suddenly attacked. He rushed towards Gong Dai, his sharp inner strength directly cutting through his flesh, but he could not stop. He strenuously walked in front of Gong Dai. Prince. His voice trembled so much that it was torn apart by the wind. Gong Dai did not respond. He stood there as if he had become one with the wind. Lo Chi gritted his teeth and reached out to chop at his neck. But in the next second, his hand was caught by Gong Dai. His pair of black and white eyes looked at him, but he no longer recognized him. Prince. At that moment, Lo Chi clearly felt that death was in front of him. If he did not say anything, he would definitely die. The princess will definitely not die. It was unknown if Gong Dai heard him, but a bone-chilling cold slowly crept up from Lo Chi's hand. Gong Dai. He was forcefully pouring his inner strength into Lo Chi's body. Ah! The tearing pain suddenly attacked. Lo Chi was a strong man, but at this moment, he could not help but scream like crazy. His meridians simply couldn't withstand the surge of inner strength. The feeling of his meridians being torn apart was even more painful than death by 1,000 cuts. He could not bear it and screamed out, but his screams made Gong Dai happy. His eyes quietly watched Lo Chi's ferocious appearance, his pitiful screams, and his weak struggles. Gong Dai finally confirmed that this was his true nature. This was the way he liked it. He deliberately pushed his inner strength into his body, slowly torturing his nerves, slowly torturing his opponent like he was toying with him. First, he would cripple his 2 hands, then his 2 legs. Watching him go from screaming to begging for mercy, to turning into a pile of mush, that kind of feeling would be wonderful. He would be careful. He would not let him die so easily. Lo Chi found that struggling was useless. It was clearly the most crucial moment for him to break through to the 9th layer, but his prince was still so strong. While breaking through, he was also distracted by teasing him, torturing him to death. This kind of reckless action proved that he did not put death in his eyes. Everything was like a joke. Cold sweat dripped down 1 drop at a time. Lo Chi's legs went soft, and he knelt in front of Gong Dai. His right hand was completely crippled, but the inner strength immediately wrapped around his left hand. A kind of fear filled his heart. He could not die like this. Like a flash of light, Lo Chi suddenly raised his head and said in a strange tone, "Prince, Your Highness, you are so scary. Princess, I'm afraid she will not like you anymore." This sentence was really useful. It actually made Gong Dai withdraw his hand, as if he had been electrocuted. At the same time, his expanding strength suddenly became chaotic, because his heart was in chaos. Why did she not like him? She just said that she liked him. Gong Dai panicked. His brain immediately came back to his senses. His mind could not help but think of what Gong Yimo had said to him before. She was kneeling on top of him, covered in blood. At that moment, she was actually able to overcome the poison and send the dagger that should have killed him into his body. Her blood was so hot, so painful. She said, "I don't blame you anymore. I love you." Imo, royal sister? Gong Dai suddenly looked around blankly. The inner strength in his body became more and more chaotic. If this continued, his body would explode and he would die. Where was she? Didn't she say that she loved him? Why did she disappear? Gong Dai suddenly saw his white hair. He touched his face and his face became more and more flustered. Was it because he was too scary right now that he scared her? That's right, Mo looked brave, but she was actually the most timid. Was she so scared that she hid? Don't be afraid, even if he died, he would not hurt her. But she could not like him. Absolutely no. Allow. Allow. His strength collapsed. Gong Dai's body seemed to swell up, making an explosive sound. He was in so much pain. His body was about to split open. Now is the time. Taking advantage of the moment when Gong Dai completely turned around and his inner strength was the most chaotic, Lo Chi suddenly burst out. Using his other good hand, he ruthlessly smashed Gong Dai's neck. The violent wind suddenly reached a critical point and disappeared in an instant. It was as if some kind of connection had suddenly been cut off. Everything that happened before was an illusion. Gong Dai finally fainted. He escaped the fate of exploding and fell into endless darkness. Lo Chi endured the pain and caught him. He heaved a sigh of relief. Although he escaped death, the prince's hair would not be able to change back. Chapter 624. The water was very cold and soft. The sun was very warm. Floating up and down, she seemed to have come to a place very far away. Her head hurt. She wanted to keep sleeping like this and never wake up again. Qiu Xingfeng, dressed in white, was drinking water by the water. He was supposed to be clean, but now he was frowning, as if there was a problem troubling him. For example, why did Master leave and chase himself out of the mountain? And that strange Xue Qianzhong, could his words be trusted? Why did Master always give in to him just because he was Master's wife's nephew? Why did he trust him? After saying so much, he had always avoided thinking about one person. That person called Gong Yimo. Qiu Xingfeng frowned even more. That person, they didn't have much contact, but every time he met her, his life would become very scary. Every bad thing was related to her, but he didn't know why. He didn't hate her. It was really puzzling. Qiu Xingfeng sighed. The water was clear. His frowning appearance was reflected in it, and there was an indescribable innocence. After Master left, he found that his senior and junior brothers had changed. They became even less fond of him. Master gave him the position of sect leader, but he didn't know anything. He wanted to be obedient and wait for Master to come back, but his senior and junior brothers were more and more ostracizing him. He had no choice but to leave Mount Yunding. But after leaving Mount Yunding, he didn't know what to do or where to go. In the end, he decided to come to the capital to find Master. But when he arrived, he was in a dilemma because Master went to find Prince Qi. Prince Qi was Gong Yimo's brother. If he went to find Master, wouldn't he see Gong Yimo again? Qiu Xingfeng curled his lips. After his brain figured this out, he had been wandering around the capital. When he was hungry, he ate wild fruits. When he was thirsty, he drank water by the river. Usually, he practiced in the forest. He would just wait for Master outside the city. Suddenly, he smelled blood in the water. He raised his head and saw a bright red color floating on the water. He was shocked and quickly jumped into the water to save her. The process of saving her went smoothly. In the water, he forgot to check if she was dead or alive. After dragging her to the shore, he took a breather and lowered his head to listen to the woman's heartbeat. In Qiu Xingfeng's eyes, the concept of keeping a distance between men and women was not important, so he didn't think there was anything wrong with this. After listening for a while, he finally heard the faint heartbeat of the other party. Qiu Xingfeng heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, he raised his head and saw that the other party's face was covered by her hair. He subconsciously reached out his hand and pushed it aside. When he saw her appearance, he was shocked. He fell backwards and sat on the ground. Terrifying. Why did the person he didn't want to see the most suddenly appear before him? He wanted to turn around and leave, but when he saw Gong Yimo lying there covered in injuries, he couldn't bear to leave. There must be someone in the capital who wanted to harm her. Moreover, she was a princess, so the person who could harm her must be someone even more powerful than a princess. If she was allowed to stay here, she would definitely be caught by bad people and killed. Qiu Xingfeng bit his light-colored lips and hesitated for a while. This woman was a scourge. She killed his disciple and injured his master. He should have hated her and said some very serious words to her last time. But now, he really couldn't leave her alone. After hesitating for a long time, he finally carried her and went deep into the forest. Since someone wanted to kill her, he would hide her. As for whether she lived or died, he didn't care. All the imperial doctors gathered at Qi Manor. They didn't dare to breathe too loudly. They took turns to check his pulse and frowned. Speaking of which, the prince's body was fine. At most, he was a little weak in qi and blood. Because of his special cultivation method, his injuries were almost healed after his advancement. However, he still hadn't woken up, which made everyone very anxious. Other than the imperial doctors, the court officials were also present. It was supposed to be a joyous day. They all came to drink the wedding wine happily. They didn't expect that before they could drink the wine, they would be shocked one after another. It was hard to believe. The Empress's eyes were red and swollen. She was preparing for the national funeral in the palace, but in the end, she received such bad news. After listening to Gong Che's guard report on the situation, she fainted from excessive grief before she could catch her breath. After she woke up, she immediately sent people to look for her son. But the road to the cross-heaven stairway had been cordoned off. Even though she was the Empress, she couldn't do anything. She could only come to see Gong Dai and beg him to find her son as soon as possible. But Gong Dai didn't wake up. Waiting in front of the door, the Empress seemed to have lost her soul. She thought that her son would die with that woman. She felt that her vision was going black and she was going to cry again. What kind of sin had she committed? Her husband was dead and her son did such a thing. Now, his whereabouts were unknown. The court officials were more rational. Now, the emperor was dead and the funeral hadn't been held yet. Then, the crown prince was also dead. They didn't think that the crown prince would still be alive under such circumstances. They also didn't know that Gong Che did this to save Gong Yimo, and not to die for love like they thought. Now that the Dai Yu state had lost two pillars, only Prince Qi, Gong Dai, was left. He was capable, charismatic, rich, and powerful. To be honest, he was more suitable to be the emperor than the crown prince. But they heard that Prince Qi was also seriously injured this time. His hair was white, and he still hadn't woken up. They felt a little guilty. They hoped that nothing would happen to Prince Qi. Otherwise, the Dai Yu state would fall into civil strife. Although these subjects all had their own agendas and were rather fearful of King Qi, their lives were stable and prosperous. Once civil strife broke out, they would be in a precarious situation. Therefore, they all hoped that Gong Dai would wake up soon. Otherwise, some people would be ready to make a move. The atmosphere in the room was oppressive. Lo Qi's injury had been examined. His arm couldn't be saved because his meridians were all broken. He had to amputate his arm to save his life. When Lo Qi heard the result, he didn't say anything and just asked for the amputation. Little Seven was about to cry. He hated himself for not being able to see through people. He liked that Li Xiu a little. He didn't expect her to put such a fragrance on the prince's clothes. The imperial physician had said that the effect of rosemary incense was weak. But when a person's willpower was weak, they would be easily affected by it. It could be said that the prince would eventually go crazy. It was all related to the incense. Unfortunately, at that time, all of them went to chase after the princess, and the remaining people couldn't stop Qiu Zhongchan at all. Those people ran away without paying the price, just like that. How hateful. It was late at night, but no one left. Especially the Empress. She stayed in Prince Qi's residence, insisting on waiting for Gong Dai to wake up. Chapter 625. Candlelight flickered in the elegant and grand bedroom. The imperial physicians were standing guard at all times. Their hearts were in their throats, and they didn't dare to relax. They had also heard about Prince Qi's forceful breakthrough. His cultivation had been forcefully interrupted, and they weren't sure what would happen when he woke up. If anything happened to Prince Qi, they would be in trouble. In just 2 days, bad news came one after another. The emperor was dead, the new emperor was dead, the princess was dead, and the only pillar of support was now in a coma. Did Dai Yu state offend the gods? How could such a terrible disaster befall them? Gong Dai, Gong Dai, wake up. There was the fragrance of flowers, sunlight, and her sweet and soft voice. It was a beautiful afternoon. Gong Dai opened his eyes and realized that he had shrunk. His body was bruised, and he was sweating profusely. When Gong Yimo saw that he had woken up, she first heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she spoke with disappointment. Do you think you can become a fatty in one bite? Why are you covered in injuries again? How many times have I said it? More haste, less speed. Gong Dai looked at his hands. He remembered that when he was young, the royal sister taught him martial arts. He was very eager to become stronger. Every time the royal sister gave him a task, he would complete it several times faster than the usual. Therefore, when she wasn't looking, he would often be covered in injuries. It was fine if she didn't see it, but every time she saw it, the royal sister would harshly scold him. This time, he fainted from exhaustion. This was great. The royal sister would definitely teach him a lesson. Gong Dai tugged at his clothes uneasily. He lowered his head and waited for the royal sister to scold him. However, he didn't repent. The palace was like this. If he wasn't strong enough, he would die. Every time this happened, he would be very obedient. He knew that if he did this, the royal sister would be angry, and her heart would ache for him even more. Her heartache. Was this liking? But strangely, Gong Yimo didn't say anything. She pulled him up from the grass. You're so dirty. Come, I'll take you to bathe. The 7-year-old Gong Dai followed the 8-year-old Gong Yimo to the side of a well. Gong Dai felt a little strange. In the past, when it came to taking a bath, they would wait for Xian to boil the water and pour it into the bathtub. Why did they come to the side of the well? Gong Yimo rolled up her sleeves and fetched a bucket of water. Without saying a word, she poured it over Gong Dai's head. Gong Dai subconsciously closed his eyes. The cold well water made him shiver all over, and his little face tensed up. After the water stopped flowing, he stared at Gong Yimo with his big, clear eyes. His eyes were wet, just like a little deer, and he looked a little aggrieved. How do you feel? Gong Yimo held back her soft-heartedness and asked coldly. Gong Dai saw her unfriendly expression and thought for a moment before telling the truth. Cold? His body had been nourished by Gong Yimo for a year. He was already chubby and cute. When he made such a timid expression, Gong Yimo really couldn't harden her heart. But she had to harden her heart. It's good that you know it's cold. Gong Yimo's bun face puffed up angrily. I thought you lost all your senses and didn't know the cold or the pain. Gong Dai reached out to tug at her sleeve and said in an especially pleasant childish voice, I won't treat myself like that in the future. Gong Yimo glared at him, but she knew in her heart that he wouldn't change. She sighed softly. She pointed at the well water beside her and said, Do you know how many people have died in this well? Gong Dai didn't understand why the royal sister suddenly said this. Were there any wells in the palace that didn't have people dying? For hundreds of years, death had never stopped. Rules and power shrouded the sky. He understood the principle of natural selection since he was young. Just as he was in a dilemma about how to answer, Gong Yimo said with a serious expression, A few days ago, someone was fished out of this well. So I said that the water must be boiled repeatedly. Of course, this isn't the main point. That woman, I originally wanted to persuade her not to die. I said a lot of things and thought that she would listen, but she just looked at me and jumped down. Speaking of this, she furrowed her delicate brows, seemingly a little depressed. She recalled the look the woman gave her before she jumped down. Her eyes were filled with desolation. There was no light in her eyes. They were indifferent and pitch black. After she jumped down, she didn't make a single sound. It was as if she was a rock that sank down. From this, it could be seen how strong her will to die was. It was as if only death could release her. She suddenly looked at Gong Dai. At this moment, Gong Dai was well behaved like a fairy child. If it wasn't for the bruises on his body, no one would think that this little boy was so cruel to himself. To be honest, I really feel that the people in the palace have a kind of temperament, Gong Yimo said gloomily. You all have an innate evil aura. Either explode, die, or become twisted. Perhaps it's because you all live in the walls all year round. People will infect each other with this evil aura. Thinking of those palace servants who abused animals in private, the dark and despicable prisons, and the unheard of lynchings, she really opened her eyes after staying in the palace for a year. In the end, she sighed, "Little Rong-er, I really don't want you to become like them, but it's undeniable that you already have such a tendency." She said this sentence very seriously. The people in the palace seemed to be divided into two extremes. One was overly gloomy and had been enduring silently. The other was directly twisted and finally exploded. As for Gong Dai, the ruthlessness he showed at such a young age made her afraid. She was afraid that he would eventually walk the path of loneliness and become the most cruel person among all the cruel people. Even if he was so well behaved now, he was still young and couldn't hide it from her. Sometimes, he couldn't help but take revenge on those people in the cold palace. Although he didn't hurt their lives, she knew that he was only concerned about her. He was uncontrollably turning into the other people in power in the palace. Scheming, hypocritical, ruthless, and there was no light in his life. This wasn't the child she wanted to teach. He should have a higher perspective. Gong Dai didn't understand a little, but he understood one thing, and that was that the royal sister hoped that he could be a little less ruthless and have a little more childlike innocence and happiness that didn't belong to this palace. He sighed in his heart. The royal sister always had some strange and naive thoughts. Living in a place where the strong preyed on the weak, how could she not be twisted? Perhaps she could maintain her original appearance, because he would protect her for a lifetime. Just as he was about to say that he would be obedient in the future and be different from those people, Gong Yimo suddenly glared at him sternly. "It's normal to be trapped in a cocoon, but you're my younger brother. You won't be confined to this cage in the future. You will become the strongest existence in the 4 countries. Tolerance, benevolence, and mission, you can be disdainful, but you must have them." Chapter 626. Who said that growing up in the palace means that you have to be the same? Shouldn't the real strong jump out of it and be above it? If you don't break the rules, how can you make the rules? The more Gong Yimo said, the more reasonable she felt. If you want to be like them and become a person inside the wall, I won't allow it. Gong Dai was stunned. He didn't understand what she meant by won't allow it. He wanted to be stronger than his father and become the ruler of the palace. Wasn't she satisfied with this? Break the rules and become the strongest person in the 4 countries. The goal that the royal sister set for him was so far away. Seeing the puzzled look on Gong Dai's face, Gong Yimo suddenly stuck out her tongue. She felt that she had said too much. Really, you can't eat a mouthful and become a fatty. Under her guidance, Gong Dai would definitely become a good youth who was full of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faith. Why was she so anxious? Perhaps she just saw that he was so cruel to himself at such a young age. During this period of time, she had seen too many dark secrets in the palace. She was a little scared. Gong Dai might not become like that. So she stepped forward and hugged him. She used her internal force to drive away the cold. She said in a relaxed tone, "Relax, I'm here. There's no place that can trap you or restrain you. The only thing you have to do is to break the cage in your heart. Break the shadow that naturally binds your heart. You're unique and the best in the world. You don't have to be afraid of anyone. You don't have to suppress yourself. You can show your true nature and live the life you want. There's no construction without destruction. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up." A voice like a call woke Gong Dai up, but he didn't open his eyes. He was thinking self-deprecatingly in the dark. The royal sister certainly didn't think that she helped him break the cage of the rules and environment. But he unknowingly fell into a cage called Gong Yimo. He was controlled by her, influenced, demanded, and bound by her. She thought that he had revealed his true nature, but in fact, he hadn't. All this time, he had been happy to be trapped in her cage. However, from the moment she jumped off the cliff, this cage had been shattered. He thought with pity. If he had become her cage from the beginning, how good would it have been? She was tightly attached to him, controlled and bound by him. Then this result wouldn't have been like this. But he was lucky. Maybe God would give him a chance to correct his mistake? Gong Dai slowly opened his eyes. Before he saw his sister's body, he didn't believe that she was dead. She was his woman. How could she die? Seeing Gong Ju wake up, the imperial physician was stunned for a moment before whispering, "Your Highness is awake?" Gong Dai's heaven, and Earth Wuji's heaven, and Earth's heaven, and Earth's is heaven, and Earth's is heaven, and Earth's to be. He had a feeling that with his current strength, even if his sister went berserk, he could easily restrain her. Indeed, only with strength could one obtain everything. Many people surrounded Gong Dai's bed. The Empress was the first to be surrounded. When she came in, she wanted to question Gong Dai, but the faint pressure emitted from his body made her heart skip a beat. She couldn't help but lower her voice and plead. "Prince Qi, I beg you to save Che." She couldn't help but cry. Gong Dai's men had already gone to the bottom of the cliff. That was why they sealed off the path to the stairway to heaven. Now that the sky was dark, the people who went to search might not have reached the bottom of the cliff yet. The Empress cried as she spoke. The other officials and imperial physicians looked at each other, but they had to speak. Now that the Dai state is without a leader, the people are in chaos. Your Highness, please pull yourself together and preside over the situation. One of the officials stepped forward and spoke respectfully. When the Empress heard this, she was in disbelief. "Are you cursing Che to die?" Her face instantly contorted. "Che is still alive. He must be alive." The officials lowered their heads and ignored the Empress's cries. "Your Highness, please come to court tomorrow and preside over the situation." If there was no explanation for today's matter and no one to suppress it, all the evil people would come out to cause trouble again. "How dare you? Are you rebelling?" The Empress's face was pale as she questioned in a shrill voice. "Your Highness?" The officials ignored the Empress and pleaded. The situation was critical. How could a woman like her speak? Everyone was waiting for Gong Dai to express his opinion. Whether the Dai state would fall into chaos or not depended on Gong Dai's decision. After a long time, Gong Dai smiled gently and opened his eyes. Gong Yimo felt cold. There were countless fragments in her mind. They scattered and couldn't be pieced together. She slowly opened her eyes. Beside the fire, she saw Qiu Xingfeng. She couldn't help but blink. In an instant, the memories related to Qiu Xingfeng quickly came together, but the process was very slow. She remembered that she had transmigrated to the Cold Palace, Mount Yunding, and her master. When she spoke, she found that her voice was very hoarse. Hearing Gong Yimo's voice, Qiu Xingfeng immediately woke up from his meditation. He didn't hear what Gong Yimo said clearly. He only heard that her throat was uncomfortable and subconsciously gave her some water. After drinking the water, Gong Yimo felt much better. She felt that she had forgotten a lot of things. Although her memories with her master were slowly piecing together, many scenes were already fragmented and she couldn't remember them. "Master." This time, Qiu Xingfeng heard Gong Yimo call him master. He was shocked. The bamboo tube in his hand fell to the ground. The unfinished water spilled out and sizzled when it came into contact with the fire. You called me master?" He couldn't believe it and widened his eyes. Was this person trying to harm him again? She actually called him master. Thinking of this, Qiu Xingfeng was a little annoyed. As expected, he shouldn't have been so soft-hearted and stayed. He originally only wanted to hide Gong Yimo and apply some medicine, but seeing her covered in wounds, although those wounds were healing quickly, it would take at least a few months for them to fully recover. Did he want to keep a weak girl like her here? What if she met a beast? After some hesitation, he still chose to stay. He didn't expect that when she woke up, she would encounter a situation that he couldn't understand. "Master?" Seeing Qiu Xingfeng looking at her as if he had seen a ghost, Gong Yimo touched her face in confusion. "Master, why are you in a daze? If I don't call you master, what should I call you?" She wanted to get up, but her body hurt. Looking down, she saw that she was wearing Qiu Xingfeng's clothes. And under the clothes, there seemed to be countless wounds crisscrossing. Suddenly, she was surprised to find that her internal energy seemed to have disappeared. She was shocked. She sensed it carefully. As expected, her dantian was empty. She had lost all her martial arts. This situation made her want to cry. What should I do, master? I realized that I have lost all my martial arts. Qiu Xingfeng was shocked. He didn't care why she called him master and hurriedly grabbed her hand to check. Chapter 627. For those who practiced martial arts was their life. Qiu Xingfeng was not only good at martial arts, but he was also good at medicine. He frowned when he felt her pulse. It's okay. You're just hurt too badly and lost your martial arts temporarily. You'll get better in the future. His face suddenly turned red when he said this. And, you're pregnant. Although he didn't know how to get pregnant, he had read in books that this kind of pulse meant that she was pregnant. She had a baby in her belly. What? This time, Gong Yimo was even more surprised than him. She was looking at Qiu Xingfeng with a very shocked expression. Her mind was in a mess. She could only think of one possibility in this situation. Master, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Gong Yimo didn't know what expression to use to face Qiu Xingfeng. Anger? Grievance? Thinking of how Qiu Xingfeng didn't want her to go down the mountain. Could it be because he liked her? Wait, would her master, who was like a 10-year-old child, know what love was? Looking at her master's clothes, she didn't know whether to be angry or depressed. Why did she suddenly feel that she didn't know this world after waking up? Qiu Xingfeng didn't understand. What did she mean by he was this kind of person? What kind of person was he? Seeing Gong Yimo stare at him angrily and then look down at her clothes, he understood and explained consciously. You mean clothes? Senior brothers and sisters seem to have said something about male and female etiquette. Did Gong Yimo blame him for changing her clothes? Your clothes are all damaged. You can't wear them anymore. Gong Yimo suddenly looked up and stared at him. What's with the injuries on my body? Qiu Xingfeng scratched his head in confusion. Gong Yimo didn't know why she was injured. Maybe you met an enemy in the capital. Gong Yimo frowned. I feel like I've forgotten a lot of things. Qiu Xingfeng naturally thought, maybe it's the sequela of being hurt too badly. Your head was hit hard. Hit hard? Gong Yimo tried hard to recall. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her head. A feeling of dizziness and tinnitus appeared. Amidst the dizziness, she seemed to feel someone hugging her tightly and cushioning her. The moment the ice-cold water surrounded her, she clearly heard the sound of her spine breaking. Who was that person? Why did she feel so sad? Gong Yimo suddenly covered her head and started moaning. After a while, she even started crying. Although Qiu Xingfeng really wanted to stay away from this strange and dangerous woman, he couldn't help but ask with concern. Are you all right? How can he be fine? Gong Yimo said with a sobbing tone. Her eyes were red as if she had suffered a great grievance. For some reason, Qiu Xingfeng panicked. He didn't know what to do for a while before asking in a soft voice. What happened to you? Gong Yimo suddenly released her hands from her head and looked at him with a pair of big, tearful eyes. You're asking me what's wrong. I should be the one asking you what's wrong. Why am I so heavily injured? Why do I not remember so many things? And you, why did you do such a thing to me? What? Qiu Xingfeng stared at her confusedly. What? Gong Yimo's face was pale. She was obviously very weak, but she stared at him angrily as if she had eaten poison. Why did you take over my body? After thinking for a while, she couldn't think of anyone else. It must be her master. You even made me pregnant with your child. Qiu Xingfeng sat by the fire and couldn't understand what she meant for a long time. When he finally understood, he suddenly jumped up as if his tail was on fire. He asked in a panic, You said this child is mine? Isn't it? Gong Yimo asked back. The two of them seemed to be comparing the size of their eyes. Their eyes were filled with confusion. It was over. The confused Gong Yimo and Qiu Xingfeng who didn't know how she got pregnant. This was a big mistake. After the two of them stared at each other, Gong Yimo felt that there seemed to be more to this matter. Qiu Xingfeng felt that this matter was very scary. The two of them talked for a whole night. The next day, both of them had dark circles under their eyes and were depressed. Gong Yimo couldn't believe it. Except for Qiu Xingfeng, she couldn't think of anyone who wouldn't be hit by her. But how could Qiu Xingfeng do such a thing? Could it be that he took some medicine by mistake and became delirious? Her heart ached. What should she do? She lost her virginity to her master. Even if she met someone she liked in the future, she couldn't marry him. In ancient times, chastity was very important. Why was she so unlucky? But looking at Qiu Xingfeng's innocent face and confused face, she sighed. What was the use of scolding him? They had lived together for more than 10 years. Qiu Xingfeng was as innocent as the snow on Yunding Mountain. He couldn't have done it on purpose. This child, although it was an accident, she still couldn't bear to lose it. After all, it was a life. Qiu Xingfeng wasn't born stupid. This child's IQ should be fine, right? Qiu Xingfeng had never been so confused. He seemed to be caught in an unsolvable riddle. He felt like he was falling into the clouds, floating up and down. Could it be that when he saved Gong Yimo, he did something that made her pregnant? Thinking of how he leaned on her chest and listened to her heartbeat, and how he saw her wounds, took off her clothes and applied medicine on her, could it be that she could get pregnant like this? Suddenly, he remembered that after they got married, they would be honest with each other. After one night, she would get pregnant. So it was really like this? It was a pity that he didn't have the consciousness of love and no one would teach him these things. Now that he suddenly had a child, he had to be responsible, right? Just like a senior brother raising a son. He had to be responsible for raising the child? He was a child himself. Suddenly, he had to raise a child. He felt stressed. Gong Yimo thought for a whole night and decided to give up. Her mind was in a mess. She felt that things might not be so simple. For example, her wounds, her missing memories, and so on. She glanced at Qiu Xingfeng uneasily. She was afraid that she had met some accident and got pregnant. Therefore, she would rather hope that this child was Qiu Xingfeng's. Although she only treated Qiu Xingfeng as a family member, it was still much better than other random people. Moreover, Qiu Xingfeng didn't refute. His thoughtful face made her accept this possibility. She sighed. If it was Qiu Xingfeng's child, then it should be his. Although she didn't know what happened, she wouldn't do anything to Qiu Xingfeng before she knew the truth. He was so innocent. Even if it was really him, he wouldn't do it on purpose. With this thought, both of them were silent. They each had their own thoughts and difficulties. In the end, it all became a puzzle in their minds. I must recover my memories and martial arts as soon as possible. If it wasn't an accident, if it wasn't her master, but some other monster, she would teach them a lesson. Qiu Xingfeng was much simpler. He suddenly felt guilty and didn't dare to wait for his master here. He better not appear in Dayu state. If Prince Qi knew that he caused his sister's pregnancy, he would definitely, thinking of the terrible consequences, Qiu Xingfeng decided to go to another country. Dayu state was too scary. Chapter 628. A Golden Millet Dream. A Lifetime in a Dream. Gong Che felt that he had two dreams. One was what Immerse said. He doubted her, made her a figurehead, and betrayed her in her previous life. Many scenes flashed by, but they were not complete. Some were beautiful, but most of them were not. The other was in the future. He protected her, loved her, and was willing to give up everything for her, but she did not believe him. What a pity. He missed her in both lives. He couldn't be her brother, but he still loved her. He wanted to be with her, to kiss her, to hug her, to hear her softly call him brother crown prince, to look at her lively eyes, to feel her never-ending vitality. So in the end, he died for her. The moment his back touched the water, he felt as if he had been slapped hard on the ground. He felt as if all the bones in his body had been broken, and he could clearly hear the sound of his spine breaking. But he believed that Immerse would not die. She must not die. So, to be able to protect her once, he would gladly do it. Mother, please forgive your willful son. But I really can't watch Immerse die without doing anything. Immerse sighed in her heart. As long as he could fight for her, he would die without regrets. Your Highness. Your Highness? A worried and shrill voice nagged at him over and over again. Gong Che frowned. Could it be that he was not dead yet? Then he smiled bitterly. So what if he was not dead? Even if he was not dead, he would be crippled, right? But no. In a daze, he moved his fingers and opened his eyes with great effort. He observed his surroundings in a daze. The Eastern Palace? Why was it so dilapidated? Although it was covered with the word happiness, the feeling of decay could not be concealed. The desk, the chair, and he looked at the ordinary wine in his hand. His mind was a little muddled. Before the age of 14, his mother was not favored, but he was still the crown prince. His father had never mistreated him. After the age of 14, he encountered the greatest crisis of his life. His mother entered a temple to cultivate, his grandfather died tragically, and his position as the crown prince was unstable. However, he had Immerse, so he easily overcame the crisis and welcomed a new life. After the construction of the Grand Canal, his life had been smooth sailing. He was well versed in every aspect of life. He had never seen such a dilapidated Eastern Palace before. Where was he? Was this really the Eastern Palace? Your Highness? The voice was calling him again. You're drunk. The voice sounded a little troubled. Tomorrow is the big day. Even if you're not happy, you don't have to torture yourself like this. How annoying. Why is this person so naggy? His head hurt. Could he not see it? Why didn't they call for the imperial physician? Gong Che tried hard to see who was so bold, but it was like a mirror in front of him. He only saw a short man with a heavy head, so he could not see his face clearly. This servant knows that you're feeling wronged. Sigh. Those noble ladies have too much power. Although your highness is the crown prince, you passed away one after another, and the Liu family fell. It's normal that they are unwilling to marry you. However, this servant believes that your highness is a dragon among men. You will definitely prosper in the future. When the time comes, they will regret it. The round-faced old eunuch thought of something and said, Miss Shang is a good lady. Although she came from the Jianghu, your highness, you have seen that she is resourceful and has many unexpected ideas. Not to mention, she admires you wholeheartedly. This servant believes that she can assist you and is someone who can share your trials and tribulations. You, even if you are unwilling, don't show it. Don't do things like drinking like today again. He spoke earnestly, but Gong Che was getting more and more confused. He could not help but ask, I want to marry a wife? No, he did not want to marry a wife. Su Miaolan alone was enough to make him hate her. He did not want to marry a wife. The old eunuch asked in astonishment, Could it be that your highness wants to break off the engagement? He showed an awkward expression. But tomorrow is the wedding. Wedding? Gong Che suddenly woke up from his dream. He looked at his hands and his mind became clearer. He looked at his clothes again and finally could not help but touch his face. He suddenly thought of something and the drunkenness disappeared in an instant. He looked everywhere for a mirror. In the end, he almost rushed in front of a bronze mirror. This mirror was not the mercury mirror that he often used in the Eastern Palace, but it could still reflect his appearance. He looked younger. No. It should be said that he looked younger than the 30-year-old in his dream. He was still 22 years old. But they were both 22 years old, and with Immerse's help, his journey had been smooth sailing. There was no such melancholy between his brows, and his physique was not as frail as it was now. His current appearance was as if he had not met Immerse and had been living a miserable life. At this time, he still did not know that he had returned to his previous life. At that time, the Empress was dead and the Liu family had fallen. Even if Gong Che was very motivated and studious, his heart was deep and he had great ambitions. But those old foxes who ate people without spitting out the bones did not think highly of him. At this time, Gong Shi, Gong Qi, and Gong Dai were all highly sought-after princes in the palace. Although he was the crown prince, he was not good at scheming. Without help, he naturally could not succeed. Seeing that the crown prince did not seem to recognize him, the old eunuch was puzzled and walked over to ask softly, Your Highness, are you drunk? Still not awake? Did you just say that I want to marry a wife? Gong Che suddenly turned his head and stared at this eunuch whom he had never seen before. In an instant, his domineering aura was revealed. He was not the unstable and depressed crown prince of his previous life. He had undergone the baptism of the imperial court, the support of Gong Yimo, and the polishing of power and benefits to become the new emperor. The moment his eyes glanced over, the old eunuch's heart actually trembled. What was going on? Why did he suddenly feel that the crown prince seemed to have changed into a different person? Had he become stronger? He hurriedly lowered his head and answered, "Yes, tomorrow is your highness' wedding day." Gong Che heard this and deeply frowned. His expression turned solemn. His appearance made the old eunuch tremble. He felt that his highness was displeased, and it made him want to kneel down and beg for mercy. He really did kneel down. "Your highness, is there something wrong?" Gong Che's mind was in a mess. He was still the crown prince, still the Gong Che, but he wanted to marry a Miss Shang. Moreover, he was in such a poor state. Combined with the old eunuch's words, it seemed that imperial mother had died and the Liu family had declined. Then in this space-time, he did not meet a mower? He asked with some apprehension, "Where is the seventh princess, Gong Yimo?" The old eunuch listened to his cold reprimand and cold sweat flowed down his back. Replying to your highness in the palace, there is only the sixth princess, there is no seventh princess. Gong Che's vision darkened. His hands supported himself on the mirror, and he only felt that he could not suppress the anger in his heart. Damn it! Did the heavens let him live another life just to tease him? No. He had to first cancel this troublesome marriage and then go find a mower. He believed that no matter which space-time it was, she would be there. "Emoer, you must wait for me." Chapter 629. The bottom of the stairway to heaven was uninhabited. Other than the fact that there were cliffs on both sides and no roads leading to this place was also a forbidden area. There were strict checkpoints set up, so more and more people could not reach this place. After the founding emperor established the capital, he decided to dig a moat on top of the original natural river, the Soaring Dragon River, regardless of the situation after the war. At that time, some sorcerers said that this place was Daiyu State's dragon vein. However, the dragon vein had just been formed and could easily change. They needed to dig a water dragon to protect the dragon vein. Under the nourishment of the water dragon, the weak dragon vein would gradually grow stronger. In the long run, in less than 3 generations, Daiyu State would definitely be able to create a golden age. It would follow the fate of the country for thousands of years. Therefore, they spent a lot of manpower and money to dig the Soaring Dragon River from the bottom of the stairway to heaven. At this time, several boats were going against the current. They were all solemn and silent as they avoided countless reefs and stones. Finally, they reached the bottom of the stairway to heaven, a forbidden area that had been sealed for hundreds of years. The leading mahogany boat gently touched the shore. A black boot embroidered with a dark silver 4-clawed flood dragon stepped on the shore, breaking the silence. This was Daiyu State's forbidden area, but it was also a place as beautiful as a fairyland. On both sides of the canyon were knife-like canyons. Flowing water that looked like blue silk flowed through the canyons. Occasionally, birds would fly by, leaving behind endless chirping sounds. The sunlight quietly illuminated this place. The black soil would reflect the lustrous light because it was dotted with round pearls. For hundreds of years, every time there was a large-scale ceremony, everyone would throw down pearls from the altar of the stairway to heaven to pray for their blessings. Gong Dai could not help but look up. The 9 steps of the stairway to heaven towered into the clouds in front of him. According to legend, this was the place where God ascended step by step. It was also the place where the founding empress died. Gong Dai suddenly clenched his fist. It was also the place where the royal sister wanted to commit suicide. Gong Dai's subordinates used relatively dense wood to build more than 10 boats that were not afraid of the dangerous shoals. They were able to go against the current so that they could reach this place smoothly. The forbidden area was indeed a forbidden area. Without enough money and resources, others could not enter at all. Soon, a guard's voice was heard. "Prince, His Majesty has been found." However, this discovery could only be a corpse. This was because when they entered, they could see everything. It was a canyon that seemed to have been carved out by a knife. There was no living person standing on the shoal. Hearing this, Gong Dai turned around and walked towards Gong Che. He walked slowly, his shoes sinking into the mud. It was called a bank, but it was not. There was no shore at the bottom of the sky stairway. It was just a half-dried riverbed left behind by the receding water. His every step was very slow, and his face was calm, as if he was stepping on the top of everyone's hearts. No one dared to raise their heads. Gong Dai walked step by step to Gong Che's side. His heart sank. It was obvious that Gong Che had been washed ashore by the rising tide at night. His skin was white from being soaked in water, and his lips were a deep purple. The imperial physician who accompanied them trembled as he went to check Gong Che's body. He thought that if the Empress knew, she would probably faint again. His Majesty is indeed dead. What a pity. He hasn't officially ascended the throne yet. Why did he want to die with the princess? Gong Dai stared at Gong Che's face. He was so lifeless, lying there coldly, and would never wake up again. The imperial physician quickly found the result. He knelt in the wetland and respectfully said, replying to Prince, His Majesty died because his spine was broken. Gong Dai suddenly raised his eyebrows slightly, but did not say anything. At that time, the royal sister had rushed towards the cliff. He had wanted to pull her back, but his legs could not move. Instead, it was Gong Che who had rushed forward and carried the royal sister down the cliff. At first, he thought that Gong Che wanted to die with love, but after thinking about it, it was not right. Gong Che's actions replayed in his mind again and again, in slow motion. He did not miss a single detail. At that time, the royal sister had been facing the cliff, but he seemed to have seen Gong Che rush up to hug her, and then use his feet to kick the stone wall in a strange position. Gong Dai had experimented countless times in his mind. When he saw Gong Che's corpse, he was finally sure that his guess was correct. Using the stone wall as a stepping stone was to fall further, so that when they fell, they would not fall on the natural stone steps. In that position, after Gong Che hugged the royal sister, he used that position to flip her over and fall with her back facing the cliff. These two seemingly useless actions were very likely to save the royal sister's life. After using the stone wall as a stepping stone, they would fall into the water, and Gong Che himself would be under the royal sister. After falling into the water, he would take the full brunt of the impact. Although the royal sister would also take the brunt of the impact, but she would not necessarily die. At this time, Gong Dai could not help but look at Gong Che. And Gong Che, who did this, would definitely die. Chapter 630. His silver-gray hair was tied up simply. He looked up at the mountain wall, as if he was thinking about something. Luo Xiaoqi couldn't help but think of the officials who left Qi Mansion with ashen faces last night. After the prince got up, everyone was waiting by the bed, waiting for him to say something to calm them down and intimidate those who had some strange thoughts after hearing the bad news. The candlelight flickered, and the silver-gray hair seemed to be shining with starlight. Why should I preside over the situation? This was the first sentence Gong Dai said as he looked at the people in front of him coldly. He wouldn't forget that these people had accused him of marrying the royal sister. Now that they needed his help, they came to beg him again. Therefore, his words caused everyone's expression to change. I swore that if I didn't reach the top, I wouldn't be an emperor. He smiled as he enjoyed those surprised expressions, but that icy chill made everyone present unable to say a single word of persuasion. Now, get out. Luo Xiaoqi shivered when he thought of this. He always felt that the prince seemed to be different. Although he still looked cold and cheerless after waking up, that pressure, that kind of aura that made people's hearts tremble, seemed to have been released. But there were not many people who noticed this. It seemed that someone was going to be in big trouble. This side was strictly guarded, but on the other side, Gong Yimo, who was in disguise, was walking on the street with Qiu Xingfeng. She touched her face and asked strangely, Master, why do I have to disguise myself? Qiu Xingfeng was originally a fool. At first, he didn't allow Gong Yimo to call him master, or asked her why she called him master. But Gong Yimo looked at him strangely and said, You are my master. If I don't call you master, what should I call you? He didn't know what to do. He thought that Gong Yimo might have broken her head. He'd better not argue with a fool. So, under her insistence, Qiu Xingfeng didn't want to argue with a fool, so he had to accept this title. He wanted to stay away from this woman who always hurt him, but when he thought about the child in her stomach, this feeling was so strange. He wanted to be close to her again. Hearing her question, Qiu Xingfeng felt a bit guilty. Would he say that he was worried that Gong Dai would come to find him and find out that he had done something terrible to his royal sister? So for the first time in his life, Qiu Xingfeng lied. You have a very powerful enemy. Have you forgotten that you are covered in wounds? If you don't disguise yourself, you'll be caught. At the mention of this, Gong Yimo felt a little scared. Last night, when they stayed at the inn, she saw the wounds on her body and gasped. How could it be so tragic? However, the strange thing was that her wound healed very quickly. It was so fast that it felt strange. She felt a little uneasy and thought that it was because her master's medicine was surprisingly effective. However, although the wound healed very quickly, it still hurt. Gong Yimo didn't know that Qiu Xingfeng would also lie. After all, they had known each other for more than 10 years. He was just a naive and sweet guy. She would never have thought that one day she would be cheated by a naive and sweet guy. The wound hurt so much that her legs trembled. With a disguised male face, she held his hand and said, "What should I do? The wound hurts so much. I can't walk anymore. Should I carry you?" Qiu Xingfeng said subconsciously. Even though he was forced to have a child, this poor guy still didn't learn how to be careful between men and women. Gong Yimo looked at the people around them. She resisted the urge to challenge the ancient people's ability to accept and said with a bitter face, "I'll be fine if you hold me. Quick, I feel dizzy." Qiu Xingfeng hurried to hold her. He thought helplessly that he had no choice. But they had a child. Qiu Xingfeng wasn't stupid. He was actually very smart. He secretly suspected this, so yesterday when Gong Yimo was resting, he went out to find someone and asked carefully. It was a very busy street at night. A woman grabbed him for no reason. He was worried that he couldn't find someone to ask, so he asked her, "Girl, can I ask you a few questions?" The gorgeously dressed girl had originally come out to solicit customers, but she was immediately captivated by the clean and handsome Qiu Xingfeng. She, who had long forgotten the meaning of modesty, was actually stunned by the clean aura on his body, and somewhat embarrassedly withdrew her hand from the other party. She said sweetly, "Young master, please ask. Why don't we go into the room and have a good talk?" As she said, she threw a coquettish glance at him. But coquettish glances were definitely thrown to the blind. Qiu Xingfeng opened a pair of innocent eyes that didn't match his age and asked seriously, "After a man and a woman see each other openly, will they get pregnant?" Although he asked this in a very serious tone, Huan Yang didn't hear his desire for knowledge at all. She giggled, took Qiu Xingfeng's hand again, and said coquettishly, "I've been in love for more than 10 years. I didn't expect that I would make a mistake." He looked like a fairy-like virgin, but she didn't expect him to know how to pretend. As soon as he opened his mouth, he revealed his true nature. This kind of flirting wasn't something that ordinary people could think of. "Young master, do you want to know?" she asked in a sweet voice. Seeing Qiu Xingfeng frown, she thought, "Pretend? You're still pretending?" Qiu Xingfeng took back his hand and said very sincerely, "Yes, miss, do you know? If you know, tell me." His acting was really good. Huan Yang threw a coquettish glance again. To deal with this kind of man, she had to go along with him. If he wanted to act, she would just play along with him. So she coquettishly leaned over and said softly, "Young master, you'll know whether you'll have a child or not after you try it." Qiu Xingfeng resisted the urge to push her away and maintained this polite smile. "Will you or won't you?" Huan Yang smiled gently, "Yes, as long as young master wants, I'll give you a child tonight." After getting the accurate answer, Qiu Xingfeng's face instantly turned bitter, as if he was in a funeral. He couldn't lie to himself anymore. He really did have a child by accident. No wonder senior sister always told him to be careful between men and women. It was really dangerous. The disheartened Qiu Xingfeng turned and left Flower Lane, completely ignoring the vexed Huan Yang behind him. Damn it, what did she say wrong? Why did he leave just like that? She thought she could have a one-night stand with this fairy-like young master, but now it was all ruined. Huan Yang was so angry that she stomped her feet. After returning to the inn, Qiu Xingfeng didn't go to his room, but to Gong Yimo's room. Because Gong Yimo lost all her martial arts and was pregnant, she was particularly sleepy, so she didn't notice. Naturally, she didn't know how bitter and hateful Qiu Xingfeng was as he sat by her bed. He struggled for a while, and finally touched Gong Yimo's belly. Gong Yimo woke up, patted his hand, and asked vigilantly, "What are you doing?" Chapter 631. Recently, she felt that her master was acting weird. Was he on drugs again tonight? Poor Gong Yimo would never think that Qiu Xingfeng would do something bad to her. She had observed him carefully and found that Qiu Xingfeng was not enlightened yet. Qiu Xingfeng panicked when he saw that she was awake, but that panic immediately turned into determination. Seeing that I accidentally got you pregnant, I've decided. I won't hate you anymore. Gong Yimo was confused. Qiu Xingfeng continued, I will be a good father, just like my senior. He was in a dilemma. He had seen his senior teaching children, and it didn't seem that difficult. Gong Yimo was confused. Anyway, he blushed anyway, I will start being good to you, for the sake of the child. Before Gong Yimo could react, Qiu Xingfeng had already gone out like a gust of wind. Gong Yimo was stunned. What was going on? Why did her master come out in the middle of the night and say a bunch of crazy things? Gong Yimo was worried. What should she do? She felt that her master had become more stupid recently. However, she couldn't remember a lot of things. She wasn't sure if her master's brain was damaged again, or if he had become stupid for no reason. She touched her belly with a face full of fear. Baby, you are not stupid, are you? A few days had passed. The capital was overcast, and there were fewer people on the streets. Everyone was in danger. A large number of imperial guards went in and out of the city gate every day. However, at this time, there were still people who were not afraid of death and had some thoughts that they shouldn't have. After Gong Che's body was found, the Empress fainted as expected. After waking up, she cried every day and lay on the bed. The matters in the court were temporarily handled by the 6 cabinet ministers. Although it was fine for a day or two, after a long time, Daiyu state would be in chaos. In such a chaotic situation, they had to hold a national funeral. Because 2 generations of emperors had to be buried at once, this funeral could be said to be unprecedented. The Empress Dowager and Empress cried until they fainted again and again. The princesses and princes also cried out, Imperial Father and Imperial Brother. Those who didn't know would really think that they were heartbroken. The weather in the early winter was unusually cold. On the last day of the national funeral, it even rained gloomily. The long funeral procession walked in the middle of the street. There were people kneeling on both sides. White mourning cloth flew in the air. The whole city was filled with grief. They were scared and panicked by this sudden tragedy. The country losing its pillars one after another. This was a prelude to the country. Thinking about this, the atmosphere became heavier. From the beginning of the funeral to the end, Gong Ju did not appear. He was holding a piece of red cloth in his hand. The unique embroidery on it indicated that this was the wedding dress that Imperial Sister had worn that day. The Imperial Army had mobilized in full force, but they could not find Imperial Sister. They only found this piece of cloth in the river. Sister Royal, are you still alive? Momo. Gong Dai tightened his grip on the cloth and carefully placed it in his arms. He raised his head and took a big gulp of wine. At this time, Gong Ju sat high on the city wall, watching the funeral procession go away. The white mourning clothes and the gloomy sky made the world completely lose its color. Gong Ju was already numb. He tilted the bottle and poured the wine down. Father, brother, rest in peace. The wine was poured out. At this time, his handsome face in the dark space had a kind of oppressive coldness. His hand tightened, and the entire white jade wine bottle turned into ashes at his fingertips. When he scattered it, it disappeared like ashes. Someone walked up behind him. "Your Highness." Gong Dai didn't turn around. He narrowed his eyes and watched the funeral procession leave. Bai Sheng's heart trembled. Just now, he saw the prince silently crush the wine bottle. In that moment, his body revealed a murderous aura that could devour people. It was as if he could easily crush someone's neck. The prince's martial arts must be the best in the world, right? Seeing that the prince ignored him, he swallowed his saliva and said softly, "I don't know who spread rumors among the people that His Majesty died because of the princess's madness. They also said that the crown prince died for the princess. This caused many students to be dissatisfied. There were even people who wrote a joint petition to question the cause. The students of Dayu State had a lot of power. They could write a joint petition to denounce the rumors. This was a rule set when Emperor Gong was still alive. It was to not be deceived and to listen to the voices of the people. Gong Dai's lips curved slightly. The wind blew his silver-gray hair. His black clothes were like ink. The two cold colors collided, pale and cold. Seeing that the prince still didn't answer, Bai Sheng sighed and continued. Those restless people not only wanted to smear the princess's reputation. Some even ordered their subordinates to submit a memorial and ask why the prince didn't erect a cenotaph for the princess. Those people had thought it through. If Gong Yimo was really fine, as long as the news of her death was announced, she would no longer be the princess when she returned. Moreover, Prince Qi didn't seem to care about anything. If they didn't act now, when would they? Royal sister's cenotaph? Gong Ju finally opened his mouth to speak, but his elegant voice immediately gave Bai Sheng goosebumps. He controlled himself and knelt there steadily, not daring to raise his head. Royal sister is not dead. How can there be a cenotaph? Bai Sheng paused and said under the strong pressure, "They all said that the princess is dead. Her body has been eaten by the fish and can't be found." Before he could finish speaking, a crushing pressure came crashing down on him. All his words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say a word. Her body was not preserved and couldn't be found? Gong Dai coldly looked at Captain Gong, who had gone far away, and revealed a cold smile. He stood up. Standing on the edge of the city wall, he would fall if he moved a little bit forward. But the more he looked, the more he couldn't see the danger under his feet. A gust of wind rose. Not only did it raise his hair and robe, it also swept up countless paper money and flew into the sky. The mournful music was endless, and the world was mournful. He stretched out his hand and caught a flying paper money. The white paper on his fingertips, the beige copper paper, and the flapping of his sleeves gave off an indescribable sense of danger and impactful beauty. But no one dared to look up. Do you think Imperial Father still needs a few people to serve him? He looked at the paper money and laughed. How could Bai Sheng dare to answer? That cold voice and the naked killing intent made people's scalps tingle. It was only those people who dared to touch the prince's reverse scale. If they didn't act on the princess, the prince would be busy looking for the princess and wouldn't have time to pay attention to them. It was still the same saying. The evils brought on by oneself were the hardest to bear. Zhaoyang Hall, the imperial court, was in a mess. No one came out to preside over the situation for 10 days, which made many people's hearts waver. Many people were dissatisfied with the orders given by the cabinet ministers and quarreled in the imperial court. Everyone was dressed in black. Because it was still the mourning period, many people's faces were heavy. All these changes were the signs of unrest. Chapter 632. A country cannot be without a ruler for even a day. So many people are looking forward to it. How long do we have to wait? Not only does King Qi not attend court, he did not even make an appearance during the national funeral. He did not even attend the funeral. He is completely focused on finding the princess. Do we have to wait until he finds her? Whispers were incessant as the crowd probed and cheered each other on. King Qi once swore that he would not become emperor, and on the day he woke up, he repeated these words in front of all of us. It is clear that he truly has no desire for the throne. Since that is the case, it is time to elect a new emperor. Right. We have to elect someone who can control the situation. The previous emperor had so many princes, and there must be more than one or two talented ones. Right. Elect a new emperor. In this atmosphere, many princes secretly glanced at each other. There was no lack of honest princes who kept their heads down, but the domineering atmosphere was growing thicker and thicker. There was one thing that was not wrong. The previous emperor had so many children, so who should they elect? Within King Qi residence, Gong Dai opened his arms to tie up his hair and change his clothes. As he changed into his court robes, the pitch-black color added layer upon layer to Gong Dai's tall and straight body, adding to his suffocating majesty. The silver flood dragon was vivid and lifelike, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it coiled around the hem of his robes. After the white jade belt was fastened, his entire person seemed even more dashing and heroic. But between his broad shoulders and narrow waist, there was a hint of elegance. It had to be said that after reaching the 8th tier, Gong Dai's aura had been revealed, displaying the words domineering and awe-inspiring to the extreme. His silver-gray hair made his skin seem even whiter, and his facial features were exquisite. He seemed even more handsome than before. This kind of beauty that made one unable to open their eyes was tinged with a trace of coldness and an unrestrained danger. But no one dared to raise their head to admire him. Even a careless glance would cause one's heart to palpitate in fear, much less stare at him. After changing his clothes, Gong Dai sat on a wooden four-legged chair and had someone tie up his hair. Gong Dai's appearance could be clearly reflected in the massive mercury mirror. He coldly and domineeringly sat before the mirror, his eyes narrowed in thought. Lo Chi walked in. At this time, he was missing a hand and was even more silent. "Your Highness, everyone is ready." Strands of hair were tied up. The silver-gray color seemed to have merged with the endless starlight. Gong Dai's thin, blood-red lips curved slightly, his eyes cold. "Pass down my order. Kill all the Snow Clan members in Daiyu State who are not registered." That light voice had instantly decided the fate of thousands of people. But this was not the end. "Inform the other 3 countries that no matter what benefits they want, I only want one." He paused and narrowed his eyes. "I want there to be no Shui surname in the 4 kingdoms. Either assimilate or die." Lo Chi's lips twitched. He wanted to say that there were good people among the Snow Clan who didn't want to be assimilated. They just didn't want to give up their surname. Not all of them were bad. However, he knew that this time, the Snow Clan had really crossed the line. In the past, the king had tolerated the Snow Clan and didn't want to kill them because of the princess. But now, no one would be able to stop His Highness now. Yes, with this order, tens of thousands of people would suffer. In less than a year, there would be no Shui surname on this continent. The silver-white crown that belonged to King Qi fell down. Together with the high-collared court robes, Gong Dai's cold and dignified aura had a hint of abstinence. He didn't sit up straight. He leaned against the back of the chair, his left hand on the armrest and the back of his hand supporting his face. In the full-length mirror, there was a hint of laziness. And Mount Yunding. He looked at himself in the mirror with a smile. "Have you found the exact location of Mount Yunding?" "Found it." Lo Chi knelt on one knee and replied word by word. "It's in Ji City." Gong Dai blinked and smiled lightly. "Pass down the order. If Qiu Zhongchan doesn't appear in front of me in 10 days, I will blow up Mount Yunding." Thinking about it this way, it seemed quite interesting. Lo Chi's scalp tingled. When he thought of the thousands of people on Mount Yunding and how much respect the people of Jianghu had for Mount Yunding, he didn't know what kind of storm would arise this time. "Yes, Your Highness." Lo Chi received the order and went out. But not long after he went out, Luo Xiaoqi came in again with a monkey in his hand. The monkey was originally in Luo Xiaoqi's hand, but when it saw Gong Dai, it immediately bared its teeth and screamed crazily. There was no other reason. Gong Dai had traumatized it too much. The night before, Gong Dai suddenly caught it and then ordered people to use an iron clamp to reach into its mouth and take out the holy stone from its body. No matter how it screamed and screamed, Gong Dai just gently pressed on its body and it couldn't move. A white-bearded old man opened its mouth with an iron clamp that had been prepared in advance. He didn't care what kind of pain the iron clamp would bring to its body. The white-bearded old man groped for a long time and made a sound of surprise. "Your Highness, this monkey is really strange. The stone you mentioned is really not in its stomach, but in its throat. It was born with a deformity, and its throat is divided into pouches. When its throat was opened, the monkey felt that it had never been in so much pain. Gong Dai smiled gently. Take it out. Squeak. When the monkey heard this, it wanted to struggle, but it couldn't move. It could only stare at Gong Dai with a pair of big and round eyes. The pleading in its eyes was so obvious. Gong Dai was unmoved. Under the bright light, his handsome face was like a god's, but his smile was faint. It was reflected in the monkey's mind, reminding it of the terrifying evil god that was carved in the sacrificial ceremony many years ago. When the iron clamp reached into the pouch, the monkey's mouth was immediately filled with blood, and it screamed in horror. The stone seemed to have become one with its pouch, but there was no other way. It could only die. It could only endure it. Who told the prince to want this stone? The blood-stained stones were pulled out little by little. The monkey was on the verge of death and could no longer scream. Later, the doctor prescribed medicine for the monkey, and it slowly recovered. But from then on, the monkey developed a deep fear of Gong Ju. When others shouted, "Your Highness," it would tremble. At this time, it saw the devil again. But even if it struggled desperately, the terrifying aura belonging to Gong Dai was pervasive. It suffocated it. Let it go. Luo Xiaoqi obeyed and quickly released the little monkey. As soon as the monkey fell to the ground, it immediately jumped. It wanted to go out. It would die here. Gong Dai calmly looked at the monkey looking for the exit. Finally, it rushed to the door, but in the next second, the room was flat and the door was slammed shut. Gong Ju's ghostly voice came from behind, causing it to instantly explode. Come here. Go over? Don't you want to die? The monkey had lived for many years and had seen too many evil gods. It was very intelligent. It could feel that Gong Dai was very dangerous. It was afraid of him. When the monkey heard that, it immediately retracted its 4 claws, looking like it didn't dare to do it again. It was pressed down by Gong Dai's large hands until it was swaying left and right. This time, it was much more obedient. It didn't dodge, and it didn't dare to be rash. It looked at Gong Dai with teary eyes, and its 2 hands made a human-like gesture of pleading, which made Gong Dai laugh out loud. Prince. It had been a long time since he laughed like this. Why did they still feel a chill? Everyone kneeling on the ground felt their hearts beat fast. Finally, Luo Xiaoqi braced herself and said something. Prince, it's time to go to court. Gong Dai seemed to be in a good mood. He forcefully ravaged monkey and directly lifted it up. Yes, it's time to go to court. Gong Dai put the little monkey on his shoulder. As expected, it retracted its claws and obediently squatted on Gong Dai's shoulder. Its understanding of the situation made Gong Dai very satisfied. He looked at the mirror and finally got up. If I don't go now, they won't remember who this king is. Gong Dai smiled and went out. At this time, who dared to say that it was inappropriate for Gong Dai to bring monkey to court? Wasn't that courting death? Luo Xiaoqi hurriedly followed. Originally, the prince didn't want to care about those people. The prince was focused on finding the princess, but he didn't want those people to mess with him. He was afraid that after today, those people wouldn't dare to act rashly. That's right. Only by suppressing all the voices of opposition and those with bad intentions could the prince use the power of the whole country to find a person. He just hoped that those people wouldn't die too miserably. Dayu State had been experiencing too many funerals recently. The court was in a mess. Everyone said that they wanted to nominate someone to temporarily manage the government affairs. But who was this person? Some people said that the first prince was the eldest prince. Although he was not the eldest prince, he occupied the title of eldest. Wasn't this a logical thing to do? Some people also recommended the 7th prince. The 7th prince was young, but he was very smart. Most importantly, his family was powerful. Although it was far from Gong Che and Gong Dai, it was much stronger than the other princes. Some people also recommended the 5th prince, while others recommended the 10th prince. The previous emperor had over 30 children. Excluding the few that were killed by Gong Dai, Gong Che, and a few princesses, there were still quite a lot of candidates. Many of them were very honest, some were pretending to be honest, and some were very obvious. In short, it was very lively now. At this moment, an announcement was heard. Prince Chi has arrived. The entire court instantly quieted down. Some people widened their eyes in surprise. Didn't they say that Prince Chi was focused on finding the missing person? Why did he suddenly come to the court when he hadn't shown himself? No matter what everyone thought in their hearts, as soon as Gong Yi appeared, almost everyone put away their thoughts at the same time and prepared to wait and see what would happen. Soon, Gong Dai appeared at the entrance of the main hall. Everyone's gaze was uncontrollably attracted to him. However, Gong Dai's aura was too strong. They couldn't help but look below Gong Dai's shoulders. Wait, why was there a monkey? But for some reason, no one dared to say anything about Gong Dai's untimely action. That oppressive aura that seemed to have substance, before he even got close, was already enough to make people's legs tremble. How lively! Gong Dai smiled lightly. No one could tell what he meant. They only felt that his smile could chill people's hearts. If not for the fact that their identities were different, the moment Gong Dai appeared, everyone only wanted to kneel down to express their respect and obedience. Could it be that this was the so-called domineering aura of a ruler? He strode in, and the powerful deterrence made the officials on both sides involuntarily lean to the side. As for Gong Dai's brothers, they all had different expressions. They didn't know what kind of expression to use to face him because Gong Dai wanted to stand among them. But no, Gong Dai directly walked up. What was he doing? Everyone's eyes widened. They wanted to say something, but no words came out. They watched as Gong Dai calmly walked up the golden stairs to the dragon throne that symbolized status and power. Then, he turned around and sat down. The monkey very obediently lay on the carved dragon head on the right armrest of the dragon throne. Gong Dai placed his hand on its head and leaned forward slightly to look down. His cold gaze swept over everyone, making all kinds of thoughts disappear. They only had the impulse to kneel down and shout "Long live!" Speak. Gong Yi narrowed his eyes, and his unhurried voice clearly reached everyone's ears. Who do you want to be the emperor? Chapter 634. As soon as Gong Ju's words came out, the entire hall fell into a strange silence. Quite a few people were trying to figure out what Gong Dai was thinking. Who do you want to be emperor? Was it appropriate for you to ask this question from the dragon throne? Everyone blushed with shame. Some smart people had already understood the deeper meaning of Gong Ju's words. For King Qi to ask this question, it was clear that he did not wish to become emperor himself. But he had sat on the dragon throne and used an absolutely tyrannical tone to ask this question, clearly conveying one message. No matter who becomes emperor, you must know that this dragon throne is not something that this king can sit on whenever he wants. This meant that no matter who became emperor, King Qi's status would be higher than the emperor's. His question could be roughly translated as, which one of you wants to be this king's puppet emperor? Everyone quickly understood Gong Dai's meaning, and different expressions appeared on their faces. This was especially true for the princes. They had thought that their chance had come, but King Qi's words indicated that he did not want to be emperor, but wanted to monopolize power? Then had he been playing with them when he had said, if I don't reach the summit, I won't be emperor? Seeing that no one was answering, Gong Dai leaned back, the monkey in his hand being squeezed into various shapes. He narrowed his eyes. He did not have time to delay this matter. He had to end it quickly. At this moment, someone stepped forward. He was an elder of 2 dynasties, one of the 6 first-rank ministers of the imperial cabinet, and also the grandfather of the first prince. Might I ask if King Qi has a suitable candidate in mind? Gong Dai bluntly replied, I do. Everyone subconsciously avoided the question of whether King Qi had committed a great crime by hastily sitting on the dragon throne. Instead, they directly asked who King Qi wanted to be emperor. If King Qi already had a candidate in mind, then even if it was a puppet emperor, no one else would have a chance. The old minister glanced at the first prince and hesitantly asked, Which prince? Gong Ju glanced at the crowd with a smile. and then his cold voice quietly resounded throughout the hall. Prince 19, Gong Yuan. The crowd began to whisper amongst themselves. It wasn't that they were dissatisfied, but that they couldn't immediately remember who this Gong Yuan was. Suddenly, someone remembered. Could the Prince of Qi be referring to the foolish prince who had lost his mother and became a little foolish? Speaking of which, that child was rather pitiful. He was the child of Emperor Xian and his cousin, but there was something wrong with his head. His mother had died, so he had a miserable life in the palace. Gong Dai was thinking about the night when he was 9. Many of the people with weaker mental fortitude were already trembling. If Gong Dai coughed, a large number of them would probably kneel down. At this moment, the 7th prince seemed to realize that something was wrong. His grandfather glared at him fiercely. King Chu, are you drunk? King Chu was the 7th prince's title. The 7th prince was stunned by his grandfather's words. He looked at his grandfather in disbelief. He instantly understood something, but a deep sense of indignation arose in his heart. They were both father's children, so why was Gong Dai superior to them? I'm not wrong. He saw his grandfather's aged face instantly turn pale. The 7th prince stood in front of the throne room and loudly questioned Gong Ju, who was sitting on the dragon throne. He clenched his fists. What right do you have? Gong Dai chuckled. It had to be said that although his laughter made everyone present feel a chill down their spines, his voice was really beautiful. It quietly resounded in the hall, and it had a unique timbre. But when they thought of who he was, everyone suddenly regained their senses. They lowered their heads and distanced themselves from the pitiful 7th prince. What right do I have? He asked softly. Although he was laughing, the monkey under him sensed danger and instantly stood up. It was restless under his hand, but it didn't dare to make a sound. Just because I dare to sit here, do you dare to come up? There was a deathly silence in the hall. Sitting on the dragon throne was a crime punishable by death. Everyone wanted to, but they didn't dare. Whether or not I have the right to be in power, he sneered. You're right about one thing. I want to be the regent, and I want Gong Shiju to be the puppet emperor. This is a notice to you, not a laughable request for opinions, understand? Chapter 635. His straightforward words made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. He wanted to be the regent, wanted to set up a puppet emperor, and even threatened everyone in court. But the problem was that no one dared to refute King Qi's arrogance. In terms of power, Zhao Yu alone could make you lose a layer of skin. In terms of money, the entire country's money was in Gong Dai's pocket. In terms of fighting power, it was said that he already had a mature military camp that no one could defeat. In terms of ability, Gong Dai was only 17. He was able to reach this stage, hold multiple positions, and sit on the dragon throne without them daring to say a word. This was the embodiment of his ability. The 7th prince's face was green and white, but it was very good-looking. Also, is the name of royal sister something you can call? His cold voice suddenly became stern at the last sentence. His eyes were like lightning, tightly locking onto the 7th prince. An awe-inspiring pressure suddenly appeared. It actually made the 7th prince's pupils shrink. He, who had been speaking confidently, suddenly knelt down. His face paled, and he struggled to get up, but found that his palms and back were covered in cold sweat. His legs were weak, and he could no longer get up. A gust of wind blew, and the entire hall was filled with a ruthless aura. King Qi was angry. For a long time, they had been afraid of Prince Qi, mainly because of the previous accumulation of deterrents. However, they didn't know how terrifying Gong Ju had become after suffering such a great calamity. He was no longer the soft-hearted and apprehensive King Qi from before. He was the regent. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in the hall. This raging wind made everyone panic, and some even wanted to flee. But they only heard a series of pong, pong, and the 12 doors closed one after another. This action frightened everyone present. Many of those who did not have enough willpower banged on the doors or shouted for the guards outside. The light in the hall suddenly dimmed. Gong Ju ignored the noise in the hall and bowed his head to play with the little monkey's claws. The little monkey's body trembled, but it obediently held back its knuckles and let Gong Ju play with it. This subtle gesture of flattery made Gong Ju suddenly feel that it was good to have a pet. The guards outside seemed to be dead, and there was no response at all. Everyone could not help but feel a chill in their hearts as they realized that they had become turtles in a jar. What was going on? In the past, King Chi was cruel, but in the end, he still relied on solid evidence to control people. But now, he actually locked all the officials in the hall. This kind of unscrupulous action, was this really the old King Chi? Could it be that he was so agitated that he went crazy? Slowly, the crowd quieted down. King Chi sat motionless on the dragon throne, but the pressure of his internal energy seemed to be everywhere. They did not dare to be rash, and their hearts began to tremble. At this moment, they finally realized that without the princess, King Chi was like an unsheathed, bloodthirsty sword. They had been too careless to think that King Chi would be depressed because he couldn't find the princess. Who would have thought that he would become even more terrifying? Not only was he not depressed, he had even gone berserk. One of the old ministers couldn't bear such a provocation. He clutched his chest as an official beside him hurriedly supported him. The old minister trembled as he asked Gong Ju, "Can't you see?" Gong Ju lowered his head to tease his pet and spoke casually, but his cold voice rang in everyone's ears. "This prince wants you all to be obedient." With a flick of his finger, the monkey bounced off his knee. The monkey was clever and quickly climbed back onto Gong Ju's knee. Gong Ju chuckled. His voice seemed to say, "I hope you can all be as obedient as this monkey." His smile sent chills down people's spines. His handsome face could not be seen clearly because it was too dark in the hall, but the danger behind his laughter was like a dagger to one's back. "What if we don't?" A pure faction official was very dissatisfied with Gong Dai's tyrannical attitude and straightened his back to ask. Gong Dai finally raised his head and glanced at him. Imperial Father told this prince in a dream that he still lacks some people to talk to. "Gong Dai, are you not following the law by doing this?" The first prince asked in a righteous tone. Gong Dai suddenly thought of his royal sister's answer and chuckled. "This prince is the law." After he laughed, his expression turned cold. The moment his face darkened, an invisible pressure seemed to appear in the air. People knelt down one after another, and this kneeling represented obedience. Gong Dai began to become restless. He did not have the patience to be entangled with these people. Gong Ju's monkey also screamed in pain because Gong Ju had lost his strength. The dark hall felt inexplicably creepy. "This prince's patience is limited." He frowned slightly and sneered. "After 3 counts, anyone still standing is this prince's enemy." He dared to be so domineering? Many of the nobles and officials were stunned. He did not give a reason, did not allow consideration, and did not care about the consequences. He announced his position so domineeringly and then gave people the choice of obedience or death. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. In the past, when the emperor and crown prince were still alive, they had always respected the nobles and officials. They had always adhered to a win-win rule, which was why they had been able to grow so quickly. In the past, when Gong Yimo was still alive, although King Chi was scary, he would not do things for no reason. He would not do things based on his preferences and speak based on his power. But now that Gong Yimo was gone, Gong Dai was like a crazy demon. He would not patiently persuade people like Gong Chung, who had clearly made a decision but still gave people a way out. He would also not be like Gong Che, who had given everyone a chance to benefit from each other. He was like a tyrannical and dictatorial tyrant. Respect? You just need to obey. 1. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and leaned back, relaxing his body. He did not have time to play Tai Chi with these people. In the past, he had considered too many things and suppressed himself for too long. He should have done this long ago. Apart from those who had already knelt, no one moved. Gong Dai did not care about them and directly said, 2. A faint light flashed in his eyes. The monkey beside him also squatted on the dragon's head armrest and bared its teeth fiercely at the people below. It knew that Gong Dai would definitely do as he said. After being abused by Gong Dai for so long, it only hoped that a few stubborn or lucky people would have a taste of its pain. Everyone looked at each other, especially the princes. They could see the struggle in each other's eyes. Could it be that their restless hearts were going to be suppressed before they even started? But before they could react, many of the officials who supported them, or some of the princes' mothers, knelt down. Once the power behind them knelt down, some of the princes had no choice but to grit their teeth and kneel. There were only a dozen people left standing. Gong Dai lowered his head the entire time. Until the last word, he slowly raised his head. 3. As the word 3 fell, his eyes swept across the crowd. His eyes were bottomless. Chapter 636. The oldest official suddenly sighed and knelt down. As soon as he knelt, the last of the Qing dynasty's backbone knelt down to show their allegiance. With the last pillar of support succumbing to Gong Dai's tyrannical power, the princes were no longer able to hold their own. They knelt down unwillingly. Finally, there was no one left standing in the entire hall. Their kneeling today completely sealed the fate of Dayu State. Little Monkey felt that Gong Dai's fighting spirit had diminished, so he lay on his lap and whimpered gloomily. After a long while, Gong Dai recovered from his violent state and regained his calm. He smiled and asked, "Gong Dai, I want to inherit Gong Dai's throne. This prince wants Gong Yuan to succeed the throne. Does anyone have any objections?" There was no sound in the hall. It was as if the hundreds of kneeling people did not exist. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes. "You're not willing?" It was as if a string had suddenly snapped. This implied threat woke everyone up from their daze. "We second the motion." Everyone quickly kowtowed. "We second the motion." Their voices resounded throughout the hall. Finally, the door opened. The 12 doors opened one by one. The cold and solemn air seemed to have been soothed. They had come back to life. They did not know why, but when the door opened again and light shone in, they felt as if they had escaped death. Everyone was shocked to find that they had broken out in cold sweat. It turned out that the body was always more sensitive than the mind. Gong Dai really wanted to kill people to vent his anger and wash the imperial court with blood. The sudden appearance of the light diluted Gong Dai's hostility. He gently patted Little Monkey and said softly, "19th brother is still young. I am the regent. Does anyone have any objections?" The important officials were all kneeling on the ground. They had been suppressed by Gong Dai to the point that they had no temper. How could they have any objections? "We second the motion." Thus, Gong Dai easily took over the sovereignty. However, this was only a superficial victory. If he really wanted to hold power and centralize the imperial power, it was impossible to do so without bloodshed. The following month was known as the Bloody Winter Moon. Some of the nobles were dissatisfied with Gong Dai's tyrannical methods, and they felt that Gong Dai was suppressing them so that he could take back his authority in the future. Of course, Gong Dai really wanted to do this, so they joined forces to resist. The first prince and the 7th prince took command and denounced Gong Dai together. What happened next was very simple. Gong Dai violently used force to suppress the other party. Originally, everyone's understanding of the Lei Feng stopped at the stage where it could build roads and dig rivers. Although they knew that it was very strong, Gong Yimo's years of hard work had given them a preconceived notion that the Lei Feng could not be used to kill people. But why not? For Gong Dai, there was no such thing as impossible. Everyone thought that Gong Dai wouldn't go against Gong Yimo's wishes and start a war with the army. However, he did. He directly mobilized 1,000 soldiers and destroyed tens of thousands of enemy troops in a battle in the countryside. He caught them off guard. That kind of overwhelming and destructive power caused the entire Dayu state to be shrouded in a haze. Some people wanted to crack the Lei Feng's composition, but under Gong Dai's control, they were very bold. All raw materials, even fireworks and firecrackers, were listed as prohibited goods. Some people wanted to buy from overseas, but they didn't expect Gong Dai to have already made arrangements. In the end, they had no choice. The opponents wanted to steal from Gong Dai's subordinates, But they didn't expect the Lei Feng's control to be so strict that it made people's hair stand on end. Moreover, no one dared to betray Gong Dai. Therefore, in less than a month, a huge rebellion was suppressed. The imperial court was washed with blood, and many new faces were replaced. These people were all Gong Dai's loyal followers. Power was concentrated in Gong Dai's camp, and the title of Grand Regent was well-deserved. But even so, the prince wasn't happy. On the day of the execution, Gong Dai didn't lead the execution. His two brothers were the main culprits, kneeling below the stage. Behind them were more than a dozen officials, and behind the officials were more than 100 accomplices. This was only the first batch. Gong Dai had always understood the principle of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. This bloodbath wouldn't stop until a few thousand lives were lost. The curses and cries were incessant, but after the knife went down, it stopped abruptly. The entire execution platform seemed to be stained with blood, and the smell of blood and coldness filled the air. There weren't many spectators, and they would probably have nightmares if they saw it. Gong Dai sat at the side and drank, looking very calm. Blood splattered everywhere. The scene in front of him was so cruel that even the executioner didn't dare to watch. He secretly glanced at Gong Ju, who was still sitting there with a cold expression. It was as if the scene in front of him was nothing to him. The executioner couldn't help but calm down. He couldn't lose face in front of the regent. Hearing the curses from below, Gong Dai's expression didn't change. If curses were useful, he wouldn't be sitting here. But Gong Dai's heart was suddenly filled with anger. The little monkey in his arms was instantly enraged, and then it carefully burrowed into the ground. Recently, this scary person's temper had become more and more unstable, causing it to be treading on thin ice every day, afraid that it would be skinned alive the next second. Just as it was about to escape, Gong Dai's big hand pressed down and pressed it into his arms. "Where are you going?" Gong Dai, who had drunk some wine, had some color on his pale face, but his expression was cold and dangerous, causing the monkey to want to scream. "Even you want to leave me?" The monkey widened its eyes and quickly shook its head. It wouldn't dare. "Sir, please don't look at me like that, okay? I'm so scared." Gong Dai didn't seem to see the pleading in its eyes. "You're not allowed to leave me." The little monkey nodded quickly. It would rather die than leave. It swore. At this moment, the guilty official below the stage heard Gong Dai's words because he was close by. He couldn't help but sneer. "I didn't expect that there's something the regent can't do." He wasn't afraid of anything when he was about to die. When he saw Gong Dai's cold eyes looking at him, he laughed loudly. "I heard that the prince hasn't given up looking for Gong Yimo. It's already been a month." He laughed sinisterly and knelt on the ground. His hair was messy, and his eyes were filled with hatred. "She's long dead, swallowed by fishes and prawns. Not even her bones are left." As soon as he finished speaking, a murderous aura came over. His body fell to the side involuntarily. His hands and feet were tied, so he couldn't struggle to get up. He curled up on the ground and cursed. Gong Yimo was innocent and did countless good deeds. Why did she end up like this? It's all because of you. Gong Dai, you're an inauspicious person. You're the one who caused her death. You're the one who cursed her to death. Suddenly, his voice disappeared. It was Gong Dai. With a wave of his palm, he broke all the veins in the other party's heart. The execution ground suddenly fell into a dead silence. Gong Dai sat there with his hands pressed on the table. His eyes were slightly sinister as he stared at the dead man. Chapter 637. The executioner groaned inwardly. "You are about to die. Why do you have to speak so quickly? What if the regent gets angry and exterminates your entire family? Aren't you asking for it?" The executioner did not dare to carry out the execution. He stood at the side and did not dare to move. Even those who were cursing shut their mouths. An invisible murderous aura spread. Even if they were about to die, under Gong Dai's dangerous murderous aura, they could not utter a single word. "You all also think that the royal sister is dead?" Gong Dai's eyes suddenly swept across the crowd slowly. Everyone present felt as if they had been hung by something cold. There was a sudden feeling in their mind. That was, if they did not answer properly, everyone present would die together with him. The long hair fluttered without wind. That monkey had long run away. Everyone knelt down. This was a completely subconscious action. The executioner secretly cursed his bad luck and said with a trembling voice, replying to the regent, "The princess is blessed by the heavens. Nothing will happen to her." Bang! Everyone did not dare to raise their heads. But from the sound, they knew that Gong Dai had kicked the table in front of him. The wine bottle and cup shattered, reflecting a cold light on the ground. He raised his robe and asked again, "You all also think that this prince caused her death? Could it be that he was really an inauspicious person?" With Gong Dai's actions, who would dare to talk to him? His temperament was obviously unstable. Coupled with the provocation from others, he was like a furious beast. What a tough life. Today, he would probably die here. "What are you talking about?" A male voice suddenly sounded. Gong Dai's somewhat red eyes swept over. The person who came was stunned. He paused and then said with some annoyance, "Look at yourself. Every time Gong Yimo talked about you, it was as if you were the one and only existence in the world. In the end, we still haven't found her body. Are you about to go crazy?" The person who came was travel-worn. It was actually Shan Shiyi. After Gong Ju declared his sovereignty, it wasn't long before he went to the border to temper himself. He didn't expect that by the time he returned, everything had changed. Originally, he wanted to find Gong Ju and have a good talk. Why couldn't he even protect a person? But seeing Gong Dai's appearance, he did not have the mood to argue. Gong Yimo, that fellow, valued him so much. If he was really crazy and she was still alive, how sad would she be? Gong Ju stood on the stage and looked down at Shan Shiyi. Shan Shiyi appeared in front of him with a bag on his back. "I don't know why you're acting like a madman, and I don't care, but I do know that if Gong Yimo sees you like this, she'll blame herself." Shan Shiyi's ts the same stuzazazazazas. Everyone present was kneeling, but they were extremely grateful for Shan Shiyi's appearance. They could clearly feel that they had escaped a calamity. "Do you think she's still alive?" It was a cold and indifferent voice, but there was an undetectable fear in it. Shan Shiyi could hear the uneasiness in his voice. He was too scared. Everyone had unintentionally revealed an attitude that Gong Yimo was dead. If she was still alive, it was impossible for her to not appear for so long. Over time, he was really too scared. He was so scared that he could not control himself. He was so scared that he wanted everyone to be buried with her. It was as if she had disappeared, and all the colors had died with her. He was scared. "She's alive," Shan Shiyi said very firmly. His face was like jade, and it was rare for him to be so serious. "She hasn't appeared. Maybe she's trapped by something, or maybe she's unconscious. But I know she's waiting for you." Gong Dai seemed to die. His heart trembled and thumped. It had been a long time since he heard his own heartbeat. She was still alive. She was waiting for him? He did not know why, but Gong Dai suddenly wanted to see her so badly. She must be alive. Shan Shiyi saw that the crisis was over, and his heart trembled. In fact, he was also scared just now. At this moment, even if Gong Dai did nothing, it was scary, let alone when he was angry. He pretended to be relaxed and said, "Don't push me too hard. Do you have time? Let's go for a drink together." At this moment, Gong Dai finally calmed down. He glanced at Shan Shiyi. No wonder the royal sister helped him before. He was indeed a person who was not so annoying. But he did not have time to drink. His subordinates could not find her, so he decided to find her himself. Although he could get news from all directions the fastest if he stayed in the capital, he did not want to wait. No matter what, as long as she was still alive, he would definitely find her. Gong Yimo sneezed. It could not be helped. She had caught a cold. After being pregnant, she became greedy and sleepy, and her body seemed to be not as good as before. The weather suddenly changed last night, and the next day, as expected, she fell sick. Qiu Xingfeng carried her carefully. Now that they were in the wilderness, they did not have to worry too much. "How's your injury?" Qiu Xingfeng asked softly. Gong Yimo looked at the gloomy sky and closed her eyes to catch up on sleep. It's much better now. It's already scabbed. Qiu Xingfeng nodded blankly. After a while, he asked again. Are you still dizzy? Gong Yimo said drowsily. The medicine is working. I'm not dizzy anymore. I'm just a little sleepy. Oh right, master, where are we going? Qiu Xingfeng did not have any idea. Soon, it seems to be Yi country. Yi country was a small country in the border area between Daiyu State, Yuheng, and Luyi. It was a very mysterious small country in the mountains and forests. Its area was only equivalent to a city in Daiyu State. Why are we going to Yi country? Qiu Xingfeng suddenly sweated profusely, because the whole Daiyu State was crazily looking for her. He had a feeling that if Gong Dai found his sister, he would be killed by Gong Dai. Gong Dai was using the whole country to find her. I heard that. Yi country is aloof from worldly affairs. It's very suitable for nurturing babies. Oh, Gong Yimo did not ask anymore. She lay on his back and fell asleep. Recently, she had been dreaming about strange things. She dreamed about another person's life. It was a girl who raised a boy and depended on each other. Her dreams were very coherent and the content was super realistic. It was like watching a play. But the girl and the boy's faces could not be seen clearly. Well, it was just a dream. How could it be so detailed? Sometimes at night, she felt that someone was calling her name. But when she woke up, she only felt bitter in her heart. But she could not see the person who called her name. Was pregnancy always so scary? She could only catch up on sleep during the day. Luckily, Qiu Xingfeng was very obedient. Sometimes, she felt that Qiu Xingfeng was strangely obedient. Just like that, the two of them arrived at the Yi Kingdom while their minds were in a mess. This country was very mysterious. It was really in a forest and aloof from worldly affairs. Chapter 638. Then, Gong Yimo started the first stage of pregnancy, which was very uncomfortable. She basically vomited whatever she ate. She was only 2 months pregnant, but she already felt like giving birth to the baby. Waking up in the morning was the most uncomfortable. She wanted to vomit as soon as she opened her eyes. Her stomach felt like scratching her heart and lungs. It was super uncomfortable. She felt better after eating, but she became very picky. She didn't feel anything at first, but after eating, she had a reaction. Maybe it was because the baby didn't like it, so she had to vomit again. Finally, after another round of vomiting, Gong Yimo grabbed Qiu Xingfeng's hand with a pale face. How about aborting the baby? It was too painful. Qiu Xingfeng was in a dilemma. Aborting the baby will hurt your vitality. Gong Yimo touched her face and wailed, I don't think I can see the sun tomorrow if I don't abort it. Qiu Xingfeng wasn't a man of principle. Zhenliu? Gong Yimo suddenly felt nauseous. She gritted her teeth and said, Yeah, it's better to get it over with. But the next day, Qiu Xingfeng really brought her a bowl of abortion medicine. Gong Yimo, Qiu Xingfeng? She was the one who wanted to abort the baby. What was wrong with him bringing the medicine? Why did she look at him with such a fierce look? Well, didn't you want to abort it? Gong Yimo threw a pillow at him. Scumbag, you just don't want to take responsibility. Qiu Xingfeng widened his eyes. He was wronged. He was just following her orders. He looked like an innocent rabbit in his white clothes. He pouted and defended himself in a low voice. You were the one who wanted this. Why don't you die if I want you to? Gong Yimo glared at him. She vomited whatever she ate. She was just saying it out of anger. This guy really wanted her to abort it? Gong Yimo couldn't help but feel annoyed about her future life. The baby wouldn't be smart if it had such a father. Should she find a smart father for the baby? Qiu Xingfeng felt wronged by Gong Yimo, but he didn't dare to fight back. Then what do you want? Gong Yimo slapped herself on the forehead. Why was she being so calculative with the child? He didn't know anything. Hurry up and help me up. Yes. Qiu Xingfeng instinctively turned into a waiter. He put the bowl on the table and helped Gong Yimo up. It couldn't be helped. Qiu Xingfeng had already gotten used to the training along the way. When Gong Yimo saw that he was so obedient, she felt as if she had punched cotton. She couldn't speak of her bitterness. Actually, she was just angry and wanted someone to quarrel with her. But when it came to Qiu Xingfeng, he was always the one who got bullied. She didn't have any interest in torturing him. Gong Yimo said uninterestedly, "I want to go out and see if there's anything good to eat. Help me out." Oh, Qiu Xingfeng supported her like a little wife. No matter how bad-tempered Gong Yimo was, she couldn't do anything to Qiu Xingfeng, who was good-tempered. She decided to let him go. The two walked down the street. It was dinner time. Many restaurants emitted the aroma of food. Gong Yimo wanted to vomit again when she smelled it. At this moment, she suddenly saw a notice on the very conspicuous sign. The reason why she stopped was not because of anything else, but because there was a woman drawn on it that resembled her. Gong Yimo was in disguise now. She didn't forget that she had an unknown enemy, but the person who posted the notice was really generous. It was said that if you found this woman, you would be rewarded 100,000 gold. That was 100,000 gold. Smelting technology was low these days. Even Yi Kingdom couldn't gather so much gold. She suddenly felt a little panicked. This woman couldn't really be her, right? Her enemy's background was so big. What's wrong? Qiu Xingfeng walked over and asked her. Gong Yimo pointed at the notice uneasily and said, "What should I do? I don't think it's safe to stay in Yi Kingdom. My enemy seems to be here." Qiu Xingfeng took a look. She does look like you. Then what should we do? The two looked at each other. Qiu Xingfeng scratched his head awkwardly. Should we go to another kingdom? Gong Yimo nodded. Well, let's not waste time. Let's go. Qiu Xingfeng didn't waste time. The two didn't even eat and directly left Yi Kingdom. What they didn't know was that 2 hours after they left, the inn they stayed at was already surrounded by a large number of garrisons. The king of Yi country stood on the side, trembling. He really didn't understand how he had provoked this great god. Gong Dai's fingertips gently slid across the table. There was a bowl of cold medicine on the table. Other than that, there was nothing special about this room. He walked to the bed. There was a moldy smell on the bed, but there was also a light, sweet fragrance. He couldn't be wrong. This was the smell of royal sister. He didn't have any expression on his face, but his tightly closed lips were trembling slightly. Maybe it was because he took it too seriously. He couldn't be sure if this was the smell of royal sister. Maybe it was just another person with the same smell? He was hesitant, but for the first time, he was so sure that she was still alive. His baby was still alive. Gong Dai's fingers slowly rubbed the bed sheet. Did she sleep on this bed before? If he had arrived 2 hours earlier, would he have been able to see the lovely person that he had been thinking about day and night? The monarch of Yi Kingdom saw that Gong Dai didn't speak, so he asked in a trembling voice, "I wonder why the Prince Regent is here." Before he finished, a one-armed man glared at him fiercely. He didn't dare to speak at once. Yi Kingdom was a vassal state of Dayu State. The Prince Regent was the ruler of Dayu State. He didn't dare to offend him. Lo Qi glanced at his monarch. He seemed to have fallen into some kind of illusion. He maintained a motionless posture. A few days ago, an informant found out that in Yi Kingdom, someone had seen a man with a red blood stone around his neck. Although it was just a quick glance, the man had put the stone back into his collar. But that red color was the only one in the world. When he was bragging to his companions, the informant happened to hear it. He didn't pay attention to it before. Later, he thought of something and hurriedly reported it to the Prince Regent. He didn't expect that the Prince Regent would arrive in just a few days. Recently, many people had provided false clues for the bounty, but this was the first time someone had heard of the red bloodstone. It was because it was unexpected that this news was particularly reliable. As soon as Gong Dai arrived, he immediately sealed off the entrance and exit of the entire Yi Kingdom. The monarch thought that Dayu State was going to annex his country and hurriedly rushed over. Unfortunately, Gong Dai was a step too late. The medicine had already cooled down. He couldn't be blamed. There were hundreds of large and small inns in Yi Kingdom. Gong Dai moved very quickly. He directly borrowed manpower from the monarch of Yi Kingdom and searched one by one. It took him 6 hours to find this house. The waiter of the inn said that a man was staying in this house, but he seemed to have eaten something bad and kept vomiting. Once, he saw a red pendant fall out of the man's neck when he retched. The color was so beautiful that he couldn't help but take another look. Lo Chi quickly sent one of his subordinates who knew medicine to check. That person was still a little apprehensive. He was afraid that his ability was limited. He wanted to ask the waiter for the dregs of the medicine. However, when he sniffed it, he found that there was no need. Because this medicine was too distinguishable, his heart was filled with tears. With this medicine, he was 80% sure that the person who lived here was not a man. His vomiting was not because he ate something bad. However, if he said the name of this medicine, would the prince chop him to death? Seeing the waiter's strange expression, Gong Dai seemed to have sensed something and asked coldly, "What medicine?" His voice deepened. This 20-something-year-old waiter trembled. If he stuck out his head, he would be chopped off. He threw caution to the wind. Therefore, under Gong Dai's increasingly serious gaze, he knelt down on one knee, replying to the prince, "This is abortion medicine." Bang! This was the sound of Gong Dai hitting the bed. The entire room was filled with a murderous aura. Everyone quickly knelt down, including the king of Yi country. After a long time, Gong Dai faintly looked over. The king of Yi country trembled, because he felt that the regent's gaze fell on him. "Didn't you ask why this prince is here?" Gong Dai gently stroked the bedsheet. His ghostly voice sounded, "The person who lives here is the princess with the highest status in Daiyu country. She is this prince's princess. The child in her stomach is this prince's child. If anything happens to her in Yi country, or if anything happens to this prince's child, your small country will be wiped off the map." When the king of Yi country heard this, he raised his head in fear and trepidation. "I beg the prince to be merciful." His head was covered in cold sweat. He opened his eyes wide and swore, "Nothing will happen to the princess in this small country. This prince will do his best to cooperate with the prince to search for her. Please rest assured, prince. As long as she is in Yi country, this prince will." Gong Dai didn't have time to listen to his swearing. He quickly ordered, "The whole country is under martial law. Everyone is to return home. This prince wants to see the person who lives in this room. Immediately." "Yes, yes, yes. This prince will do it now. I will go now." After saying that, the king of Yi country immediately left. Gong Dai was a little anxious. He glanced at the others in the room and ordered, "All of you go and look for her too." Yes. Soon, he was the only one left in the room. He stood up and walked around. He wanted to go out and look for her, but he was afraid that the other party would come back and miss her. But the feeling of waiting here was so unbearable. He sat back on the bed in silence. In his heart, he persuaded himself again and again. The waiter said that they just went out to eat and might be back soon. If he waited here, he might be able to see her soon. Gong Dai took off his shoes and lay on the bed. He was a clean freak. Who knows how many people have slept on this kind of bed? But now, when he hugged the quilt that had her scent, he suddenly felt strangely peaceful. Fear occasionally flashed through his mind. What if the person who lived here was a woman and not his royal sister? Then he thought, what if she didn't come back and his men couldn't find her? If it was really his royal sister, she wouldn't hide from her. She wouldn't hurt their child either. And that man, he could see that the man was very accommodating to her. Who was that man? Gong Ju clutched the quilt tightly. Sometimes he tensed up, sometimes he relaxed. Her scent was pervasive. Gong Ju took a deep breath and finally calmed down. Her scent made him feel peaceful and happy. The fatigue from running around for days came. He actually fell asleep on her bed without knowing. Well, he hadn't closed his eyes for several nights. Gong Dai only slept for 2 hours. When he woke up and didn't see anyone, he frowned and became anxious. At this time, Luo Qi returned, But he also brought bad news. Your Highness, someone at the East City Gate said that they saw these two people, but they left 4 hours ago. Chapter 640. In other words, they only missed each other for 2 hours. Gong Dai was so depressed that he almost spat out blood, but he held it back, but his face was so gloomy. Did you ask where they went? They seemed to be going to Yuheng. Gong Dai got up quickly. Gather the men, let's chase them. Yes. When Gong Dai was leaving, he thought of something and turned around. He looked at the room again, and pain flashed in his eyes. If it was really you, why did you run away? He carefully closed the door. This room, this bed, the two of them had slept in it before. The moment he closed the door, a light flashed in his eyes. No matter where you run to, I will find you no matter what, Imperial Sister. And this trip was not a complete waste. At least he was 80% sure that the Royal Sister was still alive. This was the best news. Gong Yimo suddenly held her stomach and screamed, Master, Master, my stomach hurts. They were on their way. Qiu Xingfeng felt her pulse nervously and said awkwardly, It seems that there is something wrong with your spleen and stomach. You haven't been eating well recently. What should I do? Gong Yimo looked at him with her big eyes pitifully. Qiu Xingfeng couldn't stand it when she showed this expression. She was bad and often scolded him. But every time she showed a weak and pitiful look, Qiu Xingfeng just wanted to comfort her gently. She didn't know what was wrong with him. I don't have any medicine with me. Let's not go to Yuheng. Let's go to the north. There is a small country not far from there. We only need half a day to get there. There should be enough medicine there. Gong Yimo said bitterly. Half a day. Then, Qiu Xingfeng scratched his head. Then he walked to Gong Yimo and squatted down. Come, let me carry you. It should take 2 hours if we use lightness skill. Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed, but she did not hesitate and climbed onto his back. After all, this child was his. At first, Gong Yimo still had doubts. But that night, the master came to admit it himself. He said that the child was his and that he would treat her well. So, he asked for it. Humph. However, Gong Yimo couldn't help but mutter when she smelled the clean scent on his body. Master, you're the best. In the past, she had always been the one taking care of him on Mount Yunding, but now it seemed that it was the other way around. He was always learning to take care of her. Although he was clumsy, he was also very considerate. Qiu Xingfeng smiled and didn't say anything. He carried her on his back and ran. His speed was not fast, but it was very stable. It was obvious that he was taking care of Gong Yimo. With the slight bumps, Gong Yimo's stomach did not hurt as much. She leaned against his back and slept. Feeling that the woman on his back was breathing steadily, Qiu Xingfeng actually felt that it was a good feeling. In the past, when he took care of his little disciple, she would never say thank you or be grateful. It was as if what he did was right and proper. Of course, it was also right and proper for a master to take care of his disciple. But she was different. She would thank him for everything he did and would acknowledge his efforts. Although she was fierce, she would definitely be the first to stand up for him when he was bullied by others. Previously, someone saw that he was gullible and wanted to extort money from him. He gave all his money to them, but they did not let him go and forced him to hand over more money. In the end, Gong Yimo saw it. Although she had no internal energy, she still came up and kicked him. Qiu Xingfeng covered his face. They don't know martial arts. We, who practice martial arts, are supposed to help the weak. How can we bully the common people? Gong Yimo said indifferently, It's okay. I don't know martial arts either. I'm a woman. What strength can I have? After that, she stepped on his back fiercely. Her expression became ferocious. Give me all my money. The man had never seen such a fierce person. Not only was he beaten up, he quickly took out all his money. Gong Yimo did not even look at it and said, It's too little. If I don't teach you a lesson, you won't be honest, right? The blackmailer naturally understood what Gong Yimo meant. As he wailed, He reluctantly handed over his money bag to her. "Master, this is all my money. I really don't have any more." Gong Yimo only let him go. Seeing him get up, she still kicked him. "Get lost. You dare to bully my people. I think you're too daring." The man quickly ran away. He would probably take a detour when he saw them in the future. After bullying him, Gong Yimo even scolded Feng. Someone who did not know martial arts could bully him. He was a disgrace to Yunding Mountain and so on. He was so weak, but he was her master. She felt ashamed of herself. In short, she forced Feng to agree. If anyone bullied him in the future, she would not beat them up. Feng lowered his head to listen to the scolding, but he suddenly felt that she was actually quite good. Because they used Qinggong, their speed was very fast. They shuttled through the forest. Under the warm sunlight, Gong Yimo's face was pink. She slept peacefully, and the years were peaceful. Sometimes, not remembering anything was also a kind of happiness. Feng smiled. He actually knew that others called him a fool. Even his former disciple would occasionally say, "You're a fool." Gong Yimo had never said such words to him before. She was unusually patient with him. Sometimes when he encountered something he didn't know how to do and was a little discouraged, she would smile and say, "Don't worry, you haven't grown up yet." But he was 30 years older. Did he really not grow up? Feng knew that he was a fool. He was also very sad. But in front of her, she had always treated him like a normal person and guided him. Sometimes, she forced him to buy things and watched him laboriously count the copper coins one by one. Sometimes, she forced him to bargain with others. She never got tired of watching from the side, but there was no malice in her eyes. She was encouraging him. He could feel it. So in the beginning, perhaps because of the child, he wanted to take care of her and learn not to hate her. But later on, after interacting with her for a long time, he realized that he really could not hate her. She was like his family, or his little disciple who depended on each other. Perhaps she really was his disciple. Otherwise, why would she always call him master? Maybe he was stupid and forgot about it? On this side, they were happy and harmonious. But on the other side, dark clouds were gathering. Gong Ju felt like he was about to go crazy when the girl escaped right under his nose. A group of people rushed on the official road. They were all dressed in black and looked stern. Like an unsheathed sword, the horse's hooves flew as it swiftly galloped towards Yuheng. Along the way, Gong Dai would occasionally stop and ask if they had seen those two people. The people who were rushing on the road were intimidated by Gong Dai and the other's aura. They all shook their heads and said that they had not seen them. Gong Dai was a little irritated as he whipped his horse. He looked around in the wilderness and actually felt lost. "Royal sister, where are you? Where are you?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.